Everybody's...
Attention! Attention! You are listening to a pre-recorded episode of The Curious Realm. Curious Realm is busy traveling the vast void of time and space to find the best paradigm-changing content the universe has to offer. Enjoy the following transmission, and remember, stay curious. Coming to you from the city of the weird. Exploring topics from the esoteric and unexplored to dimensions unknown. Shining a light of truth on the darkest corners of our reality. Welcome to the Curious Realm.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the official Curious Realm coverage of the Texas UFO Conference right here in Jefferson, Texas. We have the pleasure of being joined by our good friend, Rita Louise. Always a cut-up, on air and off. Always a pleasure seeing you at these shows. Last time I saw you was actually at MUFON Symposium. We were crazy busy there with interviews. It was great, so it's awesome to see you here. What are you here speaking about at this year's UFOCon?
So this year I'm speaking about reptilians and underground bases.
Awesome.
And looking at it from a mythological point of view to put out the understanding of maybe it's true.
Well, and you actually have the movie Icon, which is available out there, deconstructing the archetypes of the ancients. And it's interesting that you are here talking specifically about reptilians, because that is a concept that, yes, does stretch back through the history of mankind. The idea of reptilian beings being on Earth or talking with reptilians. So let's explore this topic a little bit, Rita.
You know, so when you look at the mythic record, you know, the different gods are described in assorted different ways.
Yeah.
And so there's one group of gods that are consistently described as being half man, half snake, half man, half reptile, half man, half fish. And so the word reptilians isn't really tied to them. But if you sit there and take the notion of people are taking an oral tradition, because these stories are ancient, and before people were documenting things with art and talking about these half-man, half-reptile-looking things, then maybe that was where their mind went, that was the easiest way for them to portray it, because why would you think of a reptilianoid, you know, that's an upright, two-armed person that has scales?
Well, and I mean, really, why would you think chimeric to begin with? The combination of human and animal, which is once again very frequent whenever you're talking gods, goddesses of ancient cultures, especially whenever you're looking at Sumerian culture, Inky. Things like that, where half fish, half man, things like that. So, yeah, that is a very, very old trope in the history of humanity.
But again, there's the whole part, you're taking a verbal description and putting a graphic image with it.
Sure.
You know, so one of the things that I bring forward in my presentation are all of these images of the classic half man, half serpent, Kronos, you know, all of them.
Yep.
However, there have been some sculptures unearthed that actually that look very reptilian. You know, they kind of have like a serpent face, but a humanoid body.
Sure.
You know, that date back to like 4,000 to 6,000 BC, which is prior to the advent of writing, even in Sumeria, prior to cuneiform. And then they just kind of disappear, and this new evolution of imagery appears with the chimeric form, which I think is,
Yeah. And now, let's carry that forward into modern society, because, of course, there have been reports for decades. I mean, almost, especially once you start looking at California, places like that. There have been stories since the 1800s of lizard people in the tunnels of San Francisco, things like that. So the idea of reptilian humanoid critters being around, even Barton Nunley's book Inhumanoids, these stories have been around for a long time here in America.
Well, and you find the stories in America. I mean, all you need to do is think of Quetzalcoatl, who is half man, half serpent. And so it's not that those stories are contained in Sumeria or contained in Egypt. You find them around the world. And these stories of underground bases and underground realms transcend every culture with these beings, non-human beings, whether they describe them as some kind of reptile thing or not, living there, but the accounts always describe them as not being human.
Now, let's get into some modern experiences that people have had with reptilians, that kind of stuff.
I mean, I'm not a modern girl at all. If it's old, I will talk to you about it.
Well, I mean, when it comes to underground bases, things like that, because of course there was the whole rumor of Dulce Base, things like that. The story that came out of there, where there were numerous, not just grays, but numerous species of aliens there in the base. What's some of that you're speaking about today as far as underground bases and reptilians? I
mean, and I'm just using that as kind of the stepping off point of these are the modern stories that have come forward. John Weir talks about it, and I have notes. Thank God for notes.
Right?
Because that's what people think of. Many people, when they look at UFO material, and alien material, think it's a modern phenomena. It started in 1940 with Roswell, and there wasn't anything prior to that. And what I really like to bring to the table is these stories come from deep antiquity. And one of the things I was looking at was this timeline of more contemporary ufology. And there are these stories of aerial ships that you find from the 1800s, long before there were planes, around the advent of the hot air balloon, but they were clearly not hot air balloons. So what would be flying around in the sky if it wasn't a UFO?
Yeah. And even at the time, technical UFO, they didn't know what it was. All they could refer to it as was an airship. Once again, these stories going back, like you said, millennia of reptilian humanoids. What is the overall, affect on humanity? Do they seem to be stories where these creatures are ill-tempered toward humans, not here for our vested interest, or are they here to help us?
That's a great question, and it's one of the hardest questions to answer because there's a bit of a conundrum. So contemporary people suggest that these reptilians are here and they want to control the world, and they're underlying the New World Order and are creating all of this havoc on the planet
within our political system.
That's right. And when you look at what's going on in the world today, maybe.
It may be a much easier explanation, scarily enough.
Well, and when I look at it, it's like, why would humanity do some of the stuff that they're doing to humanity? So from that perspective, it makes me go,
Yeah.
But when you look at the stories, these reptilian beings are the ones who help create humanity. They're the ones that educated humanity, so they did all of these things to help us and move us forward.
And that has been a very interesting take that I've heard from numerous people is the fact that, no, as a matter of fact, the reptilians are not the ones with ill intent toward humanity. They are the ones who've helped us along. That it's the Greys that are much more interested in how we are a vehicle for souls and how to harvest that energy. And the idea of DNA experimentation and abduction and things like that. So it's interesting that you bring that up. What are some of the points in antiquity that kind of support that, Rita?
Well, I mean, the gods, there are tons of stories of these. So in antiquity, the reptilians are often referred to as fertility gods, or they're associated with the water, so they have a very distinct iconographic persona. And so they're always the ones that are identified as creating humanity and being the ones to teach us. But what I find interesting and makes my brain ponder is when you look at those stories, many times the teaching of humanity was considered a
anathema.
I don't know what that word is, but
a no-no. You ended up like Prometheus. You ended up like Prometheus, chained to a stone and a vulture eating your liver every single day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's like, so what was the goal? To keep us as being primate-like and not doing anything?
Yeah.
Or was the goal for us to evolve and become godlike?
Well, and even whenever you go through and humanistically look, because my brother and I got into this conversation on the way down here. We both come from a very, not very religious background. I studied as a seminarian. He was a youth minister for years, both pretty well versed in Bible history, things like that, and especially Hebrew and Abrahamic root within that. And understanding the story of creation and the fact that there are two stories there back to back. It's not just one story.
I have an answer.
It actively says first story and second story. And they're both the same story told in a different way because they're both from two different cultures.
I have an answer for that.
And, and the point here is the serpent, this thing that we have now religiously been taught over millennia to, you're cursed to the ground, because he was cursed to the ground because he made humanity understand that they had a choice. No, you won't die immediately. You'll be as gods and know good from evil if you eat from this tree. Mm-hmm. Whereas the tree of life, sure, you'll live for eternity, but you'll live for eternity in ignorance. So which one would you like? So because he gave us the choice, once again, cast down.
That's right.
Was the serpent actively doing anything bad by exposing us to free will?
That's the question. And that's the question. But I want to go back to your two stories in the Bible.
Yeah.
So when you start looking at creation stories in other cultures, you find two primary narratives. One, that humanity is created out of mud or the earth. And then the other one is that they're created out of some piece of genetic material. So Eve is created out of the rib of Adam.
Yeah.
But then when you look at the Sumerian story, which I find interesting, it takes both of those and blends them together.
Yeah.
Where they take a clay bowl, so now you have the earth, and the essence, the spit, or the blood of the gods is put into this bowl and mixed with the genetic material of the primates, and humanity is created. So there are the two stories, but you also have these two major themes that you find very consistent in this.
Yes, and that you find throughout mythologies across humanity, especially even the concept of life being breathed into that mud, and the idea that, our words are more powerful than our actions because of that, because the world was spoken into being. We now take part in that vibration of creation. So it's interesting to see that even that knowledge is once again secreted away and occulted from most people, Rita. And, it's always been interesting to me how, once again, many people get sucked into the rabbit hole of the evil reptilians, when in all actuality, once again, it's typically been the opposite way around. They are the ones that have given us and exposed us to the choice, or exposed us to the technology, or given us the wisdom that we keep looking to return. Even the ancient Mayans were looking for the return of Quetzalcoatl, the serpent god. They were awaiting that return forever and always.
It is interesting that in some stories, not all, but some stories, there's this notion of, well, when they created humanity, they made them too smart and they had to dumb them down, and because they would become, and this is my favorite, they would become godlike.
Yeah.
But when we got that choice and we started learning to do things, if you think about contemporary society now, we are doing things that are godlike based on the mythic record. We're flying around in aerial craft. We are doing genetic engineering.
Absolutely.
We are doing DNA work and making clones. And so we are godlike now.
Absolutely. And that's just it. The old quote that any science to an old culture would be indistinguishable from magic. The things that we talk about as magic, it's something that we discuss on the show regularly, Rita, is the idea that we as humanity have lost ourselves and our knowledge numerous times over. The Pumapunku is a prime example where you see very large megalithic stones from a culture that the next culture said, well, that's so good, we're going to build on top of that. And we look at them as a megalithic culture. And they were like, but their stones were way bigger than our stones, and they were older than us. And then you see Spanish architecture on top of the megalithic architecture. Rocks. And it's like bricks. It's like mud bricks.
With a lot of mortar.
Yeah. And it's like you see these huge planks of stone that somebody 30,000 years ago was able to move up that mountain and make it happen. And the Spanish couldn't.
But what I think is interesting in talking about that area, in Peru, is that there is the belief that, like Sacsayhuaman, the wall with those giant stones with the intricately pieced together rocks, had been built 50 years prior to the arrival of the Spaniards. And an intelligent person, how's that, would go, but there has to be some old codger guy that remembers building those walls and the technology. Like, how could the technology just disappear? And
the thing is, we write things down, and ancient cultures wrote things down, but did it survive? It's kind of the idea of fantastic. I've got literally a half terabyte thumb drive right here. It's got schematics on it. It's got data. It's got stories from humanity, all kinds of things. Throw it over my shoulder onto a beach and find it in even 50 years. Will they know what a thumb drive is? We have kids right now that don't know what an 8-track tape is. They're just now learning what a vinyl record is.
How to use a rotary phone.
That's quite literally a recovery of technology because of people's interest in that technology. I'm Cajun. It's the example I normally give on the show. I'm Cajun. My mother is 100% Cajun. I'm 50%. You're hard-pressed to find a Cajun my mother's age who speaks Cajun. One generation, a language indigenous to America, almost gone. 50 years. That's all it takes for us to lose humanity and lose our knowledge as a greater general population. 50 years ago, you could have gone out and probably in this town of Jefferson found 3 different guys to hand carve you a spiral wooden column.
But it's changed. People sit there and talk about oral tradition and the whole telephone thing, and I tell you the story and you modify the story. And
proper oral tradition does not work that way.
And exactly. And I contest that belief because there are stories of, you know, especially like in Native American culture.
Aboriginal culture.
Yeah.
10,000 years unchanged.
But there are stories of there was a meeting 7 years ago, and the guy who is mentally recording the meeting could come back in and repeat contracts word for word.
Yeah.
Of what was said in the meeting before. And people think we don't have the ability to have that kind of memory, but I'm going to bring it into contemporary times. Think about the cover singer of a band who knows the words to thousands of songs and can just sit there, play me Hotel California. Okay, play me this.
I'll do you one better. You remember the Rolodex you used to keep in your head?
Yes. Now it's passwords.
Of no less than 50 people that you could just pick up a phone and dial 10 numbers. 7 if they were local, but 10 numbers, and you kept them in your head. If you were put into jail right now and had one phone call without your cell phone, do you got somebody that can take the call?
Nobody.
B can take a collect call, you know. But seriously, that's how fast we progress and how fast our brains forget to flex that part of it. You know, we forget
there was
very
the
rapidly.
Rolodex with the phone number. Now it's passwords.
Yeah.
How many passwords do you have stored in your brain? Oh, this one needs a control character.
Yeah, this one's 16 characters. This one's 9. But that's just it. We advance rapidly as humanity and very rapidly consider something defunct and push it away. So, yeah, the technology to build the pyramids 100 years later may not have been necessary in any way, shape, or form. So why remember it? You know, did we need aliens to build the pyramids? I personally don't think so, because we're a very ingenuitive species. We do amazing things. You know, put the professor on Gilligan's Island, see what happens. The man will make a battery out of a coconut. You know, and you can do it. You could do it. But yeah, like we know that they had Nagamati batteries. We know that ancient Egyptians had electroplating, things like that. So to think that they were just agrarian idiots is silly. It's silly.
So, you know, there's the Dendara light bulb, you know, the image in Egypt.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's the speculation that they used like the batteries, the Baghdad batteries, to light inside while they were painting and carving inside the pyramids and other structures, funerary structures. You know, and you go, okay, whatever. And then it's like, but how do you get light down there? And there's the whole mirror thing, which has been disproven. And I'm just going to tell this very funny story.
Go ahead.
And so, you know, they're like, oh, well, they had little torches down there that they burned, you know, candles or whatever, so you could sit there and see stuff. So I lived in this house, and I had a candle that was on this one spot in my kitchen. And it was always lit. You know, it was... Anyway... So I was having Thanksgiving at my house, and I'm cleaning, and there's kind of soot on the wall, you know, so I take a sponge, and I'm trying to wash the soot off, and it is not coming off. So now I'm there with the soft scrub and the magic erase thing, and I am scrubbing.
Yeah.
I repainted my entire kitchen. In time, because once I started cleaning it, it just spread
smeared. It just smeared the creosote everywhere.
And that made me go, they could not have been using flames down there, because there would have been remnants.
There would have been residue all
everywhere.
over the walls. All over the walls. Exactly. And, you know, that's kind of what we just had Stephen Myers on the show from the Pharaoh's Pump Foundation. And I love him, for his Orion correlation theory stuff, and just the idea of like correlation is not causation. Stop with that. That's not science. But also the idea that, you know, we have forgotten ourselves. There are numerous ways that they could have built this, using water locks, like he says, you know, flooding the area, barging it in and dropping you've already brought it halfway down the Nile to the location. Why would you take it off and drag it through the dirt? Why wouldn't you just skim the area with water and float the barge right on over? You know, it makes much more sense logically. So, yeah, things like that. And even the idea that, if the Great Pyramid was a tomb, I guess by all Egyptology that we know, they wanted that dude to never go to the afterlife. There's no inscriptions from the Book of the Dead on the wall, nothing like that. So whoever was there, like, your soul is staying there and never leaving, dude.
But they never found the body.
Yeah.
So that's kind of challenging. Or grave goods or anything.
And once again, no spells on the wall for set to weigh your heart against a feather. Like, you are not getting into the afterlife without these spells from the Book of the Dead, is what Egyptology tells us. Mm-hmm. So where are all the spells, Egyptology, if that is a tomb? So yeah, we have to be willing to question not only what's there, but what we've been taught. And even the idea, once again, to bring this back to the idea of reptilians and questioning that concept that we as a society have, that they're somehow evil. Once again, when you look at ancient texts, when you look at like the Temple of Asclepius, for example, when you look at the wand of Hermes, when you look at the wand of Moses that was given to him in the desert, things like that, all reptilian, all reptiles, all snakes, everything else. All these things are based in that because that's the healing side of things, oddly enough. So it's really interesting to see how modern society has twisted that reptilian presence to something evil.
So I'm going to
the same way we did religiously.
Fill your religious coffer. So according to myth, if you sit there, so in my book, E.T. Chronicles, What Myth and Legends Have to Say About Human Origin, it talks about our history based on myth, and it's a chronology of this is what happened.
Yeah.
And according to that chronology, the fertility gods, the reptilians, came to the earth first, because they had a battle with the progenitor gods and escaped, come to the earth. And so they were here first. So there are the stories. It's like, well, we were here first, and so you sky gods need to go. And I'm going to use Greek, so Kronos, fertility god, he's depicted with snake legs, gets into the battle with Zeus for control over the earth. Well, Zeus is always depicted as a white dude with a beard, and he lives in the sky above the mountains and above the birds. And so Kronos loses the war. He is sent to the depths of Tartarus to live for 1,000 years. But now the sky gods control everything. And they're the ones that set the programming and made those reptilians be evil.
Yeah. Even to the point of the curse of Medusa. And that was always one that strangely sat with me. I was very fascinated with Greek mythology in junior high and high school, like before we even read it in school. And it was one of those like, okay, so she gets raped by a god and she's the one that gets punished. I'm trying to figure that out. But once again, punished to the point of being reptilian, to the point that her sight is hideous to any that behold her. So once again, even beholding the reptilian at that point becomes a death sentence for those.
But there are stories that if you gaze upon the face of a god, you will die.
Yes.
And so that piece might have come out of that portion of literature.
And my brother and I were talking about that literally this morning before we came over here, the idea of angelic beings and even UFOs, things like that. Whenever you look at especially the biblical interpretation, the wheels of Ezekiel, things like that, the interpretation of seraphim, where they are almost terrible in appearance. If you were to look at something in the fifth dimension from a third dimensional perspective, like you would be looking at folds on folds on folds of reality. So that could be terrifying to imagine, looking at your own face with folds of your own face inside of it. Like that could be terrifying. So the idea that maybe even those mountain gods that we're talking about we're of a different dimensional being, and that's why you can't behold their face, is because we can't see into that dimension, and if you do, it's terrifying, and you don't want to look in there.
Well, you sit there and you think of people that that are experiencers, and there are some people that make it through the encounter and they find it interesting and they have this experience.
Yeah.
And then there are other people that leave with trauma. Mm-hmm. And I think for many people, especially people from ancient times, to sit there and see something like that would be a traumatic event.
Absolutely. Even now, it's a traumatic event. It drives families apart.
And we have X-Files.
Well, it's quite literally, and it's something that we talk about all the time on the show with experiencers. You look at cases like Terry Lovelace, with his experience in Devil's Den State Park with his friend. They were quite literally EMT technicians together for almost 20 years. That's like rolling with a cop partner. You see some things and you go through some depth and you bind with a person in a different way when you're saving lives on the daily. For them to both experience that and then never talk about it to the point that it drove them apart because they can't talk about it and they don't know how to talk about this traumatic experience that happened to them because, it is traumatic. Normally right now is when I point to the wall of books behind me from signed authors and experiencers. And it's like, yes, it ends like a Disney movie, but it also starts like a Disney movie, which means the first 5 minutes is horrifying for somebody involved, And it's that metastatic change that happens to them, that hypostatic change, where you learn to process it through a different lens, and you also learn to process reality through a different lens now because of that experience. And sometimes it doesn't shake out well for some people, sadly. And that's where people like you come in, Rita, who do soul work and help people find these spiritual turmoils in their life and shake the ticks off the dog.
Yeah. Or at least come to accept what's going on. And it's like, okay, it really sucked. But it really sucked.
But where can we carry it from here is the point. Yes, that's a point in your life. It may be a pivot point and a crux point, but where's it winding you to and where do you fly to from there is the important thing. So I love talking with you. It's
I love
always
talking
great.
to you too.
We could go literally all day, Rita. Let everybody know where they can go to keep up with you, where they can go to find your research, your movies, where they can go to get a soul session with you, because your work is absolutely awesome.
Thank you. So my website is soulhealer.com. soulhealer.com, and it's loaded with articles and videos, and you can get copies of my books or any, my movie Icon. You can get a copy of that there, or you can download it from there. And I just want to do this little pitch. So I do a live stream on Thursday night. It's called Thursday Night Live with Dr. Rita Louise. And you know what?
It's free.
No, that's me.
Yeah. But it's a great show. It's awesome. You do live readings on there, all kinds of stuff. It's really fantastic.
It's really a lot of fun. Really a lot of fun. Thursday night, the easiest way for people to find it is to go to my YouTube channel, which is Just Energy Radio. And I'm going to be very clear. It's 3 words, Just Energy Radio. Thursday night, 7 p.m. Central. Click the live link, and it'll make it so that you can enter the chat and just get a reading on air. Hang out.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thank you so much.
You're
always
so
a pleasure. While you are online checking out everything from Dr. Rita Louise at soulhealer.com and at Just Energy Radio on YouTube, make sure to stop on by Curious Realm. CuriousRealm.com is where you can like, follow, subscribe, share, comment. It's where you can find all of our episodes, all of our live coverage from amazing events like Texas UFOCon. Stay tuned through this quick break. We will be right back after these commercial messages with more coverage from Texas UFOCon right here at Curious Realm, right after this.
The key to good science is good research. At the heart of good research is a good data set. With the field observation and encounter log from Curious Research, you can easily keep track of your investigative information all in one place, making it easier to review cases and readily see comparisons and contrasts between them. Whether out in the woods squatching, in a back room gathering EVPs, or using high-tech gear to track UFO, UAP activity, This easy-to-carry, pocket-sized scientific data log is the perfect companion for any field researcher. You can find your copy of the Curious Research Field Observation and Encounter Log at Amazon.com or visit the official Curious Realm store at curiousrealm.com/store to reserve your copy for yourself, your family, or a mind that you want to open. That website again is curiousrealm.com/store.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Curious Realm's continuing coverage of Texas UFOCon here in Jefferson, Texas. We have the great joy of being joined once again by Mitchell Whittington. Welcome back to the show, man.
Appreciate the invitation to come back.
You were here giving a presentation a little while ago. Let's get into the audience a little bit about what that presentation was all about.
This was about a UFO crash case that a year ago I'd never heard of. And if I'm sure you and everybody in the audience has done the thing where you're online, you're doing research, and something pops up on the side. You might be interested in this.
Yeah.
And you click on it, and like 2 hours later, you're down the rabbit hole. Exactly.
Yeah.
So it came up and it said something about the 1941 UFO crash in Girardeau, Missouri. I'm like, what? I mean, that's 6 years before Roswell.
Yeah.
I'm like, what the heck? And now I'm going on a year of digging into this case, and
Wow.
I just find it fascinating. It's really interesting, and it's quite a contrast to Roswell, which they have made an industry out of that. Just for fun, before the conference, before I went on, I went to Amazon and I chose book search, and I put Roswell in, and it said, you have 6,000 hits.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And so with Cape Girardeau, in that case, there have only ever been 2 books written about it.
Really?
In all these years. And all the information is really spotty, so it's like trying to put together a puzzle. It's been a
Interesting.
lot of fun.
Well, let's get into that case a little bit. What were some of the landmarks of it?
Well, it all started in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, which is in the southeastern corner of the state. It's on the Mississippi River.
Okay.
It's one of these towns that is built around an industry. In this case, it was shoe manufacturing,
All right.
the International Shoe Company. And they had a huge plant right there on the Mississippi. They employed hundreds, if not 1,000 people in town. So if you didn't work there, you knew somebody that did. You know?
Sure.
So that's the way the town grew. Well, the town was one of these Mayberry-esque kind of places, you know, very peaceful. Everybody knows everybody town, you know, the kind of place you'd love to grow up. Well, in April of 1941, Easter weekend, in fact, there was a minister who had just come to town. His name was William Huffman, Reverend William Huffman. And William had been brought to town because he was what in the legal world they'd call a rainmaker. You know, if you have a legal firm and you need to bring in somebody to generate revenue, you know. So they brought in a rainmaker, somebody who was good at raising money and getting a congregation to open up their billfolds and purses because the church needed money. The church really needed to build some. And it was the Red Star Baptist Church in Cape Girardeau. Well, he had only been there a few months. So he's at home on Easter weekend, and his family had all come in. And it was he and his wife, whose name was Floy, and the 2 sons, Gordon, and then the youngest son, Guy. And Guy's wife was there, and Guy's wife was pregnant, and not just pregnant, but really pregnant. So it's a happy time. Any day now, they're going to get the first grandchild in the family. So the family is celebrating. It's a Easter weekend. So at 9 o'clock that night, the phone rings. Reverend Huffman picks it up, and it's the sheriff. He says, we've just had a plane crash. Is there any way you could come out and help administer aid to the victims and the families and things like that? And he said, yeah, of course. And I've seen this a million times. I grew up living next door to my grandparents, and Granddad was an old country preacher. I've seen that happen a lot, not with plane crashes, but, with, we've had somebody in a car crash. Oh, we've had somebody had a heart attack. And I've seen him in the dead of night, get up, get dressed, get the Bible, go. And that's just the way it was back then.
Yeah.
And so Reverend Huffman said, yeah, absolutely. I'll be ready to go. Sheriff said, I'm going to send a car to pick you up. So he told his family, got a emergency I need to go help with.
Yeah.
And I don't know how long this will be. Y'all don't wait up. And he waited at the front door, and he's looking out the window. A car pulls up, and it's not a patrol car. It's an unmarked black sedan. And he can see out of the porch light that the driver's there. He didn't recognize this driver. It's nobody he had ever seen before. And he thought, all right, well, the sheriff sent him. So he goes out and he gets in the car. About midnight, he returns. And his 2 sons and his wife had waited up for him. The daughter-in-law had already gone to bed. But he comes in, and he's in a very agitated state. He's really, pacing around. He's trying to get at grips with something, and they give him a break. They let him take some time to kind of calm down. And finally, the wife says, "What happened? What's wrong?" And he said, "I'm going to tell you a story, and I will tell it once, and then we'll never speak of it again." Then he told his story. He had gone out, got in the car. He didn't know the driver, so he didn't even say hello. He just assumed he was being taken in. The driver knew exactly where to go. He's going out in the country. They go about 15 miles outside of Cape Girardeau, and he's in there probably in his mind going over what he's going to need to do, what kind of victims are he going to find there. He's got his Bible. He might have said a silent prayer for guidance, whatever. But they're approaching a field that has fires going in it. And he goes, plane crash, okay, fires, that makes sense. They park at the edge of the field, and they start walking in. And there's a lot of activity. The firefighters are trying to extinguish these fires. There's some police officers there and some civilians there as well. A couple of guys running around taking photographs, one of them a journalist that he recognized. So he sees the fuselage of the plane. He goes, okay, now here's my business. So he started walking toward it, and he saw that it didn't have any wings. Okay, probably got broken off in the crash. Yeah. So he gets closer, and he gets the shock of his life. It's not a plane, it's a disc. And the first thing he noticed, and it's funny how when you're in some incredible situation that you can't even believe, but what your mind goes to, the first thing he noticed was there's no seams, there's no rivets. How is this thing put together?
Yeah.
Which is a weird first thought, but and it also has a huge hole in it, which obviously was from the crash. So he's there for the victims. Unfortunately, he looks and he sees 3 children of the victims. 2 are laid out beside the craft. Another one is to the side. Now, the 2 that are laid out there aren't moving at all. He assumes they're deceased. The other one is showing some movement. So he thought, well, I'll go there first. As he gets closer, he realizes this is not a child. It's a being about 4 feet tall, very slender, spindly arms and legs. At the end of the hands were just a few fingers, very elongated. Head too large for the body by human standards. Sure. It looked like it was wearing a suit, a metal suit that he likened to being like crumpled up tinfoil or something.
Okay.
Big almond black eyes, 2 little holes for nose and a little slit for a mouth. And obviously everybody knows what we're talking about now. But he had never even thought about anything like this. And here it is. And it is showing some movement. So I don't know how. Well, I've seen my granddad do this under horrible situations where people are dying and, never an alien. But I've seen him go into game face mode, And so he's here to do a job. He immediately he kneels down beside this creature, takes out his Bible, reads a passage, says a prayer over him, does what he's there to do. Then he moves over to the other 2 that are deceased, repeats the process. Well, now that he's done, he's kind of just hanging back, waiting for instructions or to see if there's anything else he can help with. And he looks inside the craft in this big gaping hole, and he described it as there being a few small chairs like they were there for children. And he said that they were in front of what he described as some type of control panel. He said that they were gauges and dials. That's probably the best way he knew how to describe it.
Okay.
There was inside the ship, the same as the outside, no seams, no rivets. It couldn't figure out how this thing was put together. It's almost like one contiguous piece of metal. There was a different color metal strip around the inside that had writing on it that he couldn't recognize. He compared it to Egyptian hieroglyphics. So he backs off and he's wondering, I guess, like all of us would, what the heck I got into? What's going on here? And then he sees one of the photographers talking to 2 of the men. The photographer says, hold up one of these beings so we can get an idea, for the size and everything. So the two men hold him up between them, and they're stretching out his arms. So you can see how long the arms were, and the photographer takes the picture.
Wow.
Well, things are continuing on until suddenly the scene completely changed. Military trucks roll in. Soldiers are getting off the back. They immediately are taking control. They're telling everybody, get away from here, give us everything that you've picked up. And so as they are escorting people off the property, they're taking possession of any of these shards of metal and pieces of metal that were obviously there from the crash. Anybody that had been taking notes, they're seizing their notebooks. The two photographers, they take the film from their cameras.
Yep.
And as they're taking Reverend William away from the scene, they tell him, they said, look, this has now become a matter of national security. You were never here. This never happened. So he and the driver walked back to the car. The driver took him back home, and he walked in and told the story to his family.
Wow.
Well, after telling the story, what do you say when you just heard a story like that from somebody that you love and trust?
Yeah.
So they kind of sit around for a bit, and there's not really much to say, and it is, in the middle of the night, wee morning hours, and they, in just a few hours, have to get up. It's Easter Sunday. He's one of the ministers of the church, so he has to be there, so they all turn in for the evening. The next morning at church, no one's talking about it, no questions. Hey, did anybody hear what happened?
Yeah.
Complete silence. Nothing happened. He gets the morning paper. William looks at the morning paper. Not even a little blurb. Nothing. It's like it didn't even happen. So he just goes about his business, and he's, I guess, in his mind thinking, okay, they said this is national security. I'm not going to talk about him. Well, a week or so later, the photographer that he knew came to see him and said, I know you were there that night. I saw you, and you probably saw me. He said, I had two cameras. I had my, photojournalism camera that I used for taking newspaper pictures and things, but I had my little brownie. So when the soldiers showed up, I took my little brownie and hid it. And he said, I developed the film and I printed a photograph, and it was a photograph of the two men holding up the alien. And he said, after I printed it, I realized I don't want to be the only one that has this. This is too important. He said, so I want to give you a copy of the photograph.
Wow. And
he did. He gave him a copy of the photograph, and he said, I know that I can trust you with it. I don't know what you're going to do with it, but I just don't want to be the only one in the world that has this. So he gave him the photograph. Well, time goes by. He never speaks of it again. He never shows anybody the photograph, and he died in 1959. Well, of his two sons, Gordon had enlisted in World War II, and he had been killed abroad in 1944, and he was even buried overseas. His other son, the youngest son, Guy, took the photograph. He was going through all his dad's stuff. His mother, I don't know if he consulted her, if she didn't want it or even knew about it, but Guy took the photograph, took it back home with him. Guy did not share the same passion for secrecy about this that his dad did, so he was well known for bringing it out at parties that they had. Hey, look at this. What do you think about this? And, this is an alien. And so a lot of people saw it during that time, and he never told the full story, but his daughter, Charlotte, would later report that she remembers growing up hearing little snippets of this. And so, it was just part of her growing up, and she'd seen the photograph any number of times. Well, if you fast forward to 1984, her grandmother, Floy, the Reverend's wife, she was very old, and she had developed cancer. So by this time, Charlotte had moved to Tyler, Texas, which is about an hour and a half from where we're sitting right now.
Yep.
So she moved there, but she told her grandmother, she said, look, we don't have many family members left. Why don't you come move in with me during the treatment phase and let me nurse you? Let me just take care of you.
Sure.
It'd be my pleasure to do that. So her grandmother does this. And Charlotte starts remembering all these things that she had heard, and she decided she was going to need to get the story now if it was ever going to happen.
Yeah.
So she spent several days talking to her grandmother, trying to coax out all the information. And after a few days, she felt like she had the whole story. Well, sometime after that, her grandmother died, and she sat on this story for a while. And then 7 years after that, she decided she'd better write it down, and so she did. She wrote it down, and she shared it with a paranormal investigator, and his name, I can't remember his name right now. Let me look it up. I've got it right here in front of me. She shared it with a paranormal investigator whose specialty, his name was, I wish I'd brought my glasses over here. Leonard Stringfield. I've reached that.
Leonard Stringfield.
Yeah, I've reached that point in my life where I have to have reading glasses.
I have to take mine off.
Yeah. I have glasses in every room of the house, in both cars, in the bathroom. I mean, thank goodness my wife and I have the same prescription, because now we can share all those glasses. Yeah, Leonard Stringfield. And his specialty was crashes and retrievals.
Yep.
So he published a series of he called them not books but reports, you know, and this was in report number 6, I believe. And anyway, he had interviewed her and spoke to Charlotte a number of times, and he found her story to be credible. He also asked her to draw a picture of the picture that she had remembered, you know, and he said, hey, by the way, where is that picture? And she said, well, it's the weirdest thing. My dad knew this guy, Mr. Fisk. He was an insurance agent, I think, in town, and he was at one of the dinner parties. And he told my dad, after seeing the picture, he said, this is amazing. He said, I've got a friend that's a photographer. He could authenticate this just to, you know, give you peace of mind that this is a real deal.
This is an actual photograph.
Right. And he could make you some copies, so you don't have the only one. You'll have some backups. And he thought that was a good idea. You know, Guy did. So Guy Huffman gave it to his friend, Mr. Fisk. And Mr. Fisk left with the crowd that night when their dinner party broke up. Walked into the night, was never seen again in Cape Girardeau.
Wow.
Completely disappeared.
Wow.
So anyway, she told that story, and, you know, the UFO investigator's like, okay, can you draw a picture of what it looked like? And she drew a picture of two men holding an alien up between them. And she said, it's not a great picture, it's not a great drawing, but it's reminiscent of what it was. And I believe he even published it in one of his books, but you could see it all over the internet now.
Yeah.
But anyway, he took it and kind of introduced it into the UFO community. And slowly it started getting a little traction, never to the point of Roswell.
Well, and you know, it's interesting because once again, the case happens years before Roswell, almost a good 5 years before, and has many of the same hallmarks of Roswell. Everything from the control panels being seen to the inside of the craft having beams with writing on it.
Yeah, that's exactly the way they describe the Roswell writing.
Yeah. So why do you think it is that this one has specifically never really hit the limelight that Roswell has? Because it's fascinating. I've never actively heard of it.
Yeah, I hadn't until I saw that. And getting into it, there's not a lot of writing. It's mentioned here and there. You know, there's not been any big movies. You know, Roswell had its own TV show, you know, a fictional TV show around the incident. But this has never had anything like that. But as time went on, Stanton Freeman got interested. And he came and he talked to Charlotte, to the granddaughter. He found her story to be credible. And he took an interesting take. You know, a lot of people like Stan. I do. You know,
I love Stan.
A few people that don't like him, but because of, you know, the way he investigated things, he was like a dog. You grab onto it.
He was tenacious,
and he took an interest in the story from an angle that I think is brilliant. He said, "Well, the key to this would be finding this Fisk fella, Walter Fisk." So, using his journalistic resources and everything, he finally found him in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Wow.
70-something years old. So he contacted him, and he said, I'm contacting you because you used to live in Cape Girardeau. Yeah, that's true. And you knew Guy Huffman, which was the Reverend's son. He said, oh, yeah, I knew Guy. He had a wife with red hair. Oh, she was beautiful, which she did. She had red hair. So he remembered that part. But every time Stanton tried to bring up the photograph, it was like, no, I don't know anything about that. I know nothing about that.
Huh.
So even though he remembered Huffman, Guy Huffman, he wouldn't admit to knowing anything about the photograph.
What about the incident itself?
He didn't know anything about UFOs, but he did say that he had an active interest in them. And other people once Stanton had tracked him down, got in touch with him, and somebody had actually visited him, said he had UFO books on the shelf and everything like that, but he would never admit anything about the Cape Girardeau incident. Linda Moulton Howe, actually, she, same thing. It caught her eye. She had some conversations with the granddaughter, and she talked about it on Coast to Coast. She introduced it on Whitley Strieber's, was it Outland, whatever his podcast is.
Not Caravan to Midnight. That's John B. Wells.
Yeah. But anyway, on his podcast, they discussed it. So she was instrumental in kind of getting it out there even a little bit more.
Yeah.
And they had a pseudo-congressional hearing about UFOs about a decade ago where they had congressmen, and it wasn't really official, but these were real congressmen. And she had to testify, and she said on record, under oath, yeah, we have been picking up saucers all the way back to 1941 in Cape Girardeau.
Yeah.
So she went on the record as saying she believed it,
Yeah.
So this got other people kind of coming forward with, nobody had the real story, but people had little snippets. I remember my dad said, it turns out that not far from Cape Girardeau, there's a town called Sykeston, and there was a air training facility there. At that time, we weren't going to actually get into World War II until December.
Yeah.
But the company was the country, I should say, was ramping up. And one of the things they were doing was getting more pilots. So while they only had one facility for training pilots at that time, they started contracting with all these little flight schools.
Yeah.
The government did, and they would say, look. We need you to quit giving lessons to everybody. You're going to just do it with our guys. You're going to house them, feed them, and they're going to be little military installations. And that way they would have enough pilots when the need actually came. And one of these was in Sykeston, this little town.
Okay.
So the daughter of somebody that worked there heard the story and started connecting the dots in her head. She said, I remember Dad, who worked at that training facility, saying a few things that kind of make sense now. And one of them was that right about the time this happened, shortly thereafter, a huge transport plane landed. Now, they only dealt with small fighter pilots. They're teaching small aircraft. But yet this huge transport plane landed, and a while later took off. Nothing had ever landed there that big before, nothing since, and her dad talked about how weird that was.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't take long to figure out, okay, if you had a crash saucer, a lot of debris, and a few bodies, you got to get them out of there.
Yeah.
And where do you take them? That's another whole
closest
discussion.
civil air station.
Yeah.
Same way that they did in Roswell. They took it to the closest civil air station, and then it got moved to Wright Pat. To Fort Worth, then to Wright Pat.
Right.
To see things once again very similar to Roswell, where it's like very rapid cleanup response, very rapid response to getting things moving, getting it out. Just obviously. Because we weren't embroiled in World War II yet, not really hitting the military radar, so to speak.
True. And, I actually think the fact that we were ramping up for war helped the military at that time because, at Roswell, the thing that they allegedly told everybody is, if you say anything about this, we're going to kill you and we're going to kill your family.
Yeah.
And there's a history of that. I saw an interview with an old man that was a fisherman during World War II in the Gulf of Mexico, and he saw a Nazi sub surface. He reported it.
Yep.
And they showed up and they said, you can't talk about this. They didn't want people freaking out.
Yeah. Well, the same thing happened in Maine. I lived in Portland, Maine, and there were literally Nazi subs right off the coast.
Absolutely.
I mean, they had embattlements there to shoot at them.
Well, this fisherman told the same story. He said, they told me, if you tell anybody this, we'll not only kill you, we'll kill your family.
Yeah, and especially whenever you look at Roswell Army Airfield, the fact that that's where the Air Force, where the Army Air Wing that dropped the bomb on Nagasaki, all that stuff was. The fact that all of that was cordoned security in that area, everything else for testing, for takeoff, all of that. It makes a lot of sense that until we get this figured out, this is in proximity of this. So you say anything, we're going to kill you.
Yeah. And that's gone on for years. And from everything I've seen, the death of choice for assassination by the government seems to be either suicide.
Yeah, you get suicided, or
you get suicided, or you get hit by a car. And that there's a long history of that. In this case, they didn't have to make those threats, and I think that's because in World War II there was this huge campaign about loose lips sink ships.
Yep.
Don't talk.
Yeah.
Don't talk where your kids are going when they go off to war. Don't.
Yep.
So there was this national pride, national security.
Absolutely.
So I think a lot of it got protected under that.
Well, and rightfully so. At that point, we were at a different place in our country. We were at a different place nationally, and it was very much the idea of the government at that point was still very much your friend.
Yes.
They weren't coming and taking your gold from you. They they weren't coming and eminent domaining your property.
Right.
It wasn't the phrase I grew up with in the 80s. The 10 worst words you can hear is "I'm from the government and I'm here to help."
Exactly.
It wasn't that case. It was the time of my grandparents. We're like, hey, if our lawmakers did that, they would literally ride them out of town on a rail.
Absolutely.
It's not that way anymore. And it is to the point now, like we speak about regularly on the show, Mitch, where sadly, yes, this is going to have to come through illegal means. It's going because of the way, even the way that Eisenhower on his way out gave us the warning. And there's always that part where you hear about the industrial military complex. But if you hear his voice leading up to that and after, you really do hear this voice of warning from somebody who took an oath to defend your rights as a soldier, and telling you that we had to circumvent your rights as a citizen in order to achieve this goal. Don't let them keep circumventing your rights. Remember that you're the ones in control of this. We had to give these contractors control of stuff in order to accomplish these goals. Make sure you take them back, or else it will be compartmentalized forever and you will never know.
Right.
And that's exactly where we're at now, where we've got Grush going and saying, like, well, have I seen the bodies? No. But when I go and ask people about the bodies, they surely closed a door in my face and said, we won't tell you where our money's spent. And my job is to find out where the money's spent.
Well, and the money is, the same thing back then. It was like the warning was, if you make war profitable, you will always have war.
You will always have war. Yep. Yeah, exactly. Because
we are.
Yeah, until that point, we didn't have a standing army. World War I happened. We literally built an army. Like, it just happened.
Yep.
It was like, we need conscripts. We need to build an army because constitutionally, we're not technically supposed to have a standing army. So it's all these tiny little facets that most people are not aware of that allow this compartmentalization of information.
Yeah, which has been done.
Yeah.
Let me tell you the funniest thing about this story, though, that I found. I'm going on a year now researching this.
This is amazing, Mitch. I can't wait to follow up on this because it's remarkable.
This is one of those late night
This is a jaw-dropping case.
Yeah.
Like 6 years almost before Roswell.
Well, now that word has kind of gotten out, and again, Cape Girardeau hasn't become a Roswell. They don't have a museum. They don't have a convention. But one of the things that did happen is a local TV station decided to do a story on
an expose.
Right. And so they showed where the crash site is. They found that out.
Oh, wow.
And so they let the story off with that. But then, being official researchers and serious newsmen, they said, okay, we're going to get to the bottom of this. We're going to find out the truth. We're going to ask the Air Force.
How'd that go?
They asked the Air Force, and the Air Force came back, and in my presentation, I gave the exact statement. It's like, we got your request, and we can find nothing to do with that. And we even looked at our air training facility nearby, and they have nothing about that in their records.
Yeah.
So then the news station went, okay, the Air Force isn't going to help us. Let's go straight to the source. Let's ask somebody that knows. Let's ask the FBI. Same thing. We don't know anything about that.
Yeah. And once again, it'll be interesting to see how this case shakes out because I haven't heard a whole lot about it. Once again, cursory things from people like Linda Moulton Howe, stuff like that. But It is a remarkable case with, once again, a lot of the hallmarks of the most famous UFO case out there next to Betty and Barney Hill, Roswell.
Right.
You know.
And a military report was leaked. It's called the Twining Report.
Okay.
It's a General Twining, and he actually is famous for two things. One is a memo he wrote supposedly to go to our allies, and it just talks about the fact that we're seeing a lot of anomalous things in the skies.
Yeah.
You know, and it was a very high level just to let them know, yeah, we're seeing these things too. These things are going on.
Yeah.
He did another one that supposedly was written for Majestic.
Oh,
that
wow.
said, this is, and it's called the part of that project was Project White Hot. And you can find this on the internet. Just Google Project White Hot. Yeah. And in that report, one of the things he says is, we have all this technology that we've recovered going all the way back to 1941. So he actually mentions it in there.
Wow.
And he says, but we haven't really put it to use. We haven't used it in anything except the Manhattan Project. So he's implying that some of the technology was used. Now, we get back to, is that report real?
Yeah.
There's a number of people that online have looked at it and said, yes, that's the real thing. A number of people that go, no.
Well, when you attach it to MJ-12 documents, it can make it tough because there's been an ongoing debate for many, many years as to the authenticity of the actual Majestic 12 documents itself. So,
and if they are real, there's been enough misinformation put out to deflect it. If they're not real, there's certainly a lot of parts about it that seem like they make sense.
That seem very legitimate.
It's an interesting thing.
Yeah.
But it is mentioned in the Twining White Hot report.
Wow.
So I encourage everybody to go online and find that and just take a look. One thing I can't settle in my own mind is the report, parts of it are redacted. Now, if it was leaked, that would, to me, assume somebody found a legit copy of it and made a copy and just put it out there. Generally, you don't see redactions unless it's a Freedom of Information Act request or something like that.
Yeah.
So I do want to know why it's redacted, but the parts that I've talked about aren't. You could read them online and.
Yeah, typically, and sometimes that would happen whenever things were shared interdepartmentally without clearances.
True.
Where something would be shared with another research department, but they didn't have the general clearances for that data, so they would redact part of it, things like that.
Yeah, what I really love is the fact that they left in the fact that we have crash saucers, and we use the technology, in the Manhattan Project. What did they redact?
No, and that in and of itself is something that, as an investigator, you really, that is beyond a red flag. That's a red flare being shot in the air to you as an investigator, to be like, why is the gold what's still here?
Yeah.
The recovered technology was used to build the atom bomb and for the Manhattan Project. That's still there?
Yeah. It makes you wonder, what do we not know?
When loose lips sink ships, so that's something as an investigator that should red flag to you immediately. Yeah. So, man, fascinating case to have just literally stumbled across.
It is, and I feel fortunate because it's been entertaining to me.
I bet.
At the conference, I said, I'm not actively writing a book on it or anything like that. I just find it so interesting.
Well, apparently there needs to be a third one, Mitch.
There are two, and one of them is extremely detailed. It's by a gentleman that grew up in Cape Girardeau, and some people would say he put in too much detail. He went through everybody he knew in town as to who could have been in the field that night.
Sure.
Who were the firemen? Who were the
people that would have been on call?
Right. And I like the fact that he's captured all that.
That's important data to consider when you're chasing a dog's tail.
Yeah, exactly. So, to me, it's like this jewel out there that we're just kind of uncovering a little bit. And I'm going to keep digging on it because I'm fascinated by it. But let me tell you two weird things that have happened.
Please.
Just this year, somebody wrote a white paper on it, and it's called the Cape Girardeau UFO Conundrum. And it's to debunk the whole thing.
Okay.
But it's a very angry paper.
Debunking.
Yeah. She comes up with, well, this didn't happen. This couldn't have happened. And this thing in the timeline is wrong, so therefore everything's wrong. Which, by the time the case came out from when it first happened, 50 years went by. I can give people a little leeway of you forgot something.
Yeah.
Okay, that does to me. I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Well, and that's something that we've been talking a lot lately about with the founding of Curious Research is the idea of getting that data when it happens, as soon as you can get it. And believe me, I know, folks, when you see something, it's hard to quantify. It can be hard to take a moment.
Yep.
But if you can, take a moment and collect your thoughts, write it down, get it down when it happens, as close to that moment, because the further it goes down the line, the more you start mixing in your personal belief, the more you start mixing in your want of confirmation, things like that. You actively start deprecating data the further it goes down the line of just recall from memory.
In this white paper, one of the things that really caught my attention and kind of gave me my own personal feelings about what I think of it is, she said, well, at one point it says that the Twining report was written for Majestic. And then the answer is, but we all know that Majestic didn't exist because the FBI debunked it. Really?
Yeah. And
that's your proof?
Once again, yeah. So, Mitch, thank you so much for the time, as always. It's great chatting with you. We need to have you on more regularly. Tell everybody where they can go to find out more, not only about this case, but more about you and your books and your work.
The case is a lot of fun to research because it's little nuggets of information.
Yeah.
And you can dig and find stuff you've seen and go for a week and then find something just over here. You know, so look for the Cape Girardeau UFO crash of 1941. But like this report I mentioned, and then also another YouTube video that just came out that completely has different facts. It's like somebody tried to intentionally mutter the water. So if somebody's putting out disinformation, that tells me maybe we're on the right track or something.
Absolutely.
So, man, I appreciate you having me back.
Always great.
It's always a pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
And great to see you at the conference.
Hey,
again.
absolutely, man. While you're online checking out everything about the Cape Girardeau crash of 1941, as well as Mitchell Whittington, stop on by Curious Realm. CuriousRealm.com is where you can like, follow, subscribe, share, comment. That's where you can find all of our platforms. Pretty much if you listen on a platform or you watch on a platform, we're probably there. You can also get the all-new Curious Realm Roku app from Always Press Record Productions on your Roku device. When we come back from this break, we will have more continuing coverage of the Texas UFOCon right here in Jefferson, Texas, right after this, folks.
Thanks, man.
The key to good science is good research. At the heart of good research is a good data set. With the field observation and encounter log from Curious Research, you can easily keep track of your investigative information all in one place, making it easier to review cases and readily see comparisons and contrasts between them. Whether out in the woods squatching, in a back room gathering EVPs, or using high-tech gear to track UFO, UAP activity, this easy-to-carry, pocket-sized scientific data log is the perfect companion for any field researcher. You can find your copy of the Curious Research Field Observation and Encounter Log at Amazon.com or visit the official Curious Realm store at CuriousRealm.com/store to reserve your copy for yourself, your family, or a mind that you want to open. That website again is CuriousRealm.com/store.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Curious Realm's continuing coverage of the Texas UFOCon here in Jefferson, Texas. We have the great pleasure of being joined by Chris James. He is the author of UFOs and also the head of the Laredo Paranormal Research.
Not the head. I'm the researcher.
Researcher for the Laredo Paranormal Research Association. So tell us a little bit about how you got into the world of paranormal research to begin with, Chris.
Well, I've been interested in the paranormal my entire life. I don't know. I was that weird kid that was always reading about vampires. And as I got older, I decided, well, I'm going to get into law enforcement for a bit. And I joined the Border Patrol, 26 and a half years.
Wow. Thank you.
When you're in law enforcement, you don't talk about things like that. You don't want to have the reputation of being the guy that sees things or is interested in things like that. A friend of mine, Ishmael Quayer, he was the deputy warden at our local jail. And I knew him, he knew me. We talked about anything on the planet except paranormal. Well, finally, I went to the Laredo UFO conference in Texas A&M, and I ran into him there. It's like, what are you doing here? I'm one of the speakers. Oh.
Interesting.
It turned out we were both very interested in ghosts, UFOs, cryptids, but we didn't want to talk about it because I didn't want him to think I was weird.
Yeah.
He didn't want me to think. Well, he was the founder of the Laredo Paranormal Research Society.
Fantastic.
And he was looking for somebody to write a book about them. I was like, well, I've written some fictional books.
All right.
I can maybe knock out a nonfiction book. What can possibly go wrong? Famous last words. Nonfiction comes from in here. It flows down your arms and into the keyboard. It doesn't have to make sense. It just has to make the story flow. Nonfiction has to make sense. It has to be believable.
Yeah.
If you have a unbelievable experience, you have to make it believable. You have to, this is where we were, this is what we saw, this is what we saw it with, this is the way we investigated it, this is the proof.
Well, and you know, it's interesting that you bring that up. We recently at MUFON spoke with UAPPD, which is a group out of Arizona of former law enforcement officers that are basically trying to come forth and set up the same thing that Arrow set up for the military, where it's like, here is a reporting system for law enforcement officers. Because once again, if you were to go out on an investigation and let's just say as an active law enforcement officer, that is something that surely a defense lawyer would absolutely eviscerate your testimony on the stand about. You know, so I understand that last week you actively went out and took a UFO report. You're a believer in UFOs, right? You know, these are things that can totally sink cases, things like that. So the idea of, once again, even taking a report as an investigator, how often do you lean on your experience as a law enforcement officer when it comes to taking a report in from an individual, Chris?
I want to call it, it's a skill.
Yeah.
You learn to look at the person, the way they're speaking, the way they carry themselves, the way the story flows.
Yeah.
You listen to the words they use, but as they're using it, you look at the way they present themselves. And as you're doing this, you're back of your mind, it's saying, that's true, that's not true. That's something he heard somewhere else. It's a true story, but it's not his, that kind of thing.
Sure.
And so a lot of times, especially when I'm writing my books, I'll interview dozens, hundreds of people.
Sure.
And I have to sit there and decipher, is this person believable, or is this person just, they want to speak in public.
Sure,
there are people like that,
and there are, and it especially as an investigator, it can be hard to separate that wheat from the chaff.
Yes,
when it comes to the attention seeker versus the actual experiencer.
The most people aren't very good at lying. They are not good. The people that are good at lying, most of them have been elected to office somewhere.
No, they're actual sociopaths that we've put in charge of something.
True. It's amazing how that works. If I hired somebody to do a job for me, and they said, okay, I'm finished, and you looked outside, they're mowing your lawn. You didn't mow the lawn.
Yeah.
Not only that, but you killed the roses. No, I didn't. I'll be back next week and do it again.
Yeah.
You'd say, hit the door. Don't ever come back here again. With a politician, vote for me. I'm not lying
Yeah.
to you anymore. It's like,
Well, and once again, that brings us to the idea of policy and how these things are decided, and even when it comes to how police go about reporting things is decided by policy, things like that. So, yeah, the idea of making these things accessible to because that was a lot of the training when I met UFO or UAPPD at the MUFON symposium. What they were specifically doing was they're talking to the field investigator training course about taking a witness statement and how to feel out a witness as they're talking to you, things like that, body language, that kind of stuff. Are they being deceptive possibly while they're talking to you? Things like that, unless you've literally been interviewing people face to face, taking witness statements year after year after year for 20 years, that is a learned reflex.
Yeah.
And highly invaluable when it comes to this field.
Another trick that a lot of officers use, they'll ask you a question and you answer it. And they'll ask you a bunch of other questions. Then they'll answer that same question again.
Yeah.
And it's not that they're forgetful.
Yeah.
They just want to know, do you remember what you said?
Well, and this is quite literally a lot of the reason why I started Curious Research, and the field investigator book that we made was so that you can write that information down as it happens in the field. Because unfortunately, if any good police officer will tell you, once that hits beyond 48 hours, information starts deprecating. Somebody's experience now starts getting filtered through religious experience, life experience, lenses of experience change at that point.
Might go to sleep, have a dream about the incident, and wake up not realizing that's not quite how it happened.
You may actively see a TV show that feeds into your story somehow, because it's a similar experience. So it's interesting to see how people's stories change over time. And how the experiences change the person over time as well. In your time investigating this type of stuff, how frequently have you seen somebody's experience of something change over time in that kind of way?
A few times.
Because especially when it comes to experiences of the third and fourth kind with UFO, UAP, whenever it comes to up close and personal experiences with paranormal, that is a hypostatic change that happens in a person that can change what you fundamentally believe religiously, all kinds of things.
A lot of, when we get up in the morning, we go through the day, we go to bed at night, we're not the same person that we were when we got up.
Yeah.
Things have happened. We've seen things. We've heard things. We now know things that we didn't know that morning.
Yeah.
When something major happens, you're out in your backyard, you look up and there's a flying saucer passing over, or you're out in the woods and you actually see a Bigfoot or a dog man. You encounter a ghost and you know that was a ghost. You know it wasn't something else.
Yeah.
You're no longer that same person.
Yeah.
You go from a believer to a knower. I've seen it. It's like, seen a ghost one time.
Yeah.
And it blew my mind.
Yeah.
It was the most boring. It was just, if it hadn't have been for the fact my wife was with me, she saw the same thing, I'd have just written it off.
Yeah.
Mistaken. The person looked solid. They looked real until they were no longer there. And all of a sudden I was like, whoa, wait a minute. If that wasn't a ghost, what was it?
What was it? Yeah, precisely. And it's that idea that belief implies faith. And once you've experienced it, something beyond faith, and I am somebody who, because of the experience, I do a lot of this show because of the experiences I've had in life, and because I guess I'd love something to disprove them to me. I've yet to find anything to disprove them to me. So to me, they are still absolutely and fundamentally real to me in the fabric of my reality, and because of that, I am prone to believe the experiencer until proven otherwise. Now, I will still search for data. I won't just fully prima facie take somebody on their word. I'll investigate what I can investigate, and if it comes to the point that things mitigate other than what they've said, then I will take that with the grain of salt that it is and add that to the mixture, you know. But as an investigator, that's what we're called to do, you know. Unfortunately, a lot of people in various online communities think that the badge skeptic is some sort of nasty, horrible, dirty word, Chris.
Oh, it's because the people that use the word a lot.
Yeah.
They have it in their title officially. They could shake hands with Bigfoot, and they would come up with this. Oh no, it's just some kind of costume, or it's like they could have a ghost walk right through them.
Yeah.
Or they could be abducted by aliens, visit Pluto, come back. They would convince themselves, no, that was just a dream. It's just my imagination. It didn't really happen. That is a complete different kind of being than I care to deal with.
Yeah.
They convince themselves that the proof is not proof. And talk about a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
That's a conspiracy theory.
Yes, exactly. And it's one of those, you know, you're using the situation to pull your narrative to it. You know, it's one of the phrases I use on the show regularly is, oh no, conspiracy theorists are out there and we pay them. They're called district attorneys.
Yeah.
Their job is literally to weave a story and take you down the path of a narrative. Of conspiracy, that somebody has conspired to commit a crime. Otherwise, we wouldn't have people convicted of conspiracy.
True.
You know? So they're obviously very real conspiracy theories. And the idea that, we fully, it's kind of a dangerous concept to know that our society is at a place of not only a want of confirmation of belief, Chris, but also at a place of cognitive dissonance, where when shown evidence to the contrary, you're still perfectly willing to hold on to that. You know, and that's one of the things that with Curious Realm we speak about regularly, the idea that, you know, just because your picture with the circle has been dismissed doesn't mean it's not still part of the scientific data set. It's still a very important part of the scientific data set. It's what we've called as a known quantitative. You know, which is an important thing. You have to be able to compare actual evidence of an anomaly against a known quantitative. So if your picture's been proved a known quantitative, still perfectly part of the scientific data set of the paranormal. It's just within the known quantitative realm, so it's going to help further prove the anomaly, you know?
Thing that really blows my mind is so many people are so focused on, we've got to get the scientific community on our side. We've got to be scientific. They might as well go buy them a white lab coat. Have you ever heard the term, the boys in the white lab coats?
Yeah. And, you know, I am of the mind that we need to at least have our stuff ready to shake hands with science. Because they're rapidly converging upon each other. Rapidly.
Some are, but there's still, you've got the old guard.
Oh, yeah.
Like the guys that run the Smithsonian. And,
sure.
The ones that are like, no, you can't see what's in our basement.
But you've got the Bigelow Institute on the other side, Bigelow Institute for Consciousness Studies, that did the whole paper. They did a whole research paper contest. Jeffrey Mitchell won that for possibilities of out-of-body next life experience, and then announced $1 million prize for whichever team could laboratory prove connection with the other side.
It sure would be nice if they'd release just a little bit of the information that they got.
They actively went through, and my copy arrived at my house yesterday. I got the shipping information, but you can actually order and contact the Bigelow Institute and get a copy of all of the consciousness studies paper.
I'm talking about what they got from Skinwalker
Ranch and things like that. It would be phenomenal.
UFO
it would be
investigations
phenomenal.
That they did,
and
they're like, no, can't see this.
Iron fist holding it, and I think most of that is due to the fact that they're still under government contract with a lot of things when it comes to that. I'm pretty well convinced that what is there is more than likely a very, very large crashed asteroid, something along those lines, with a magnetic signature that's very extraordinarily large.
But it sure would be nice if they'd
anomalies.
tell us something.
Yeah. And the thing is, they've obviously recorded a lot of anomaly over many, many years, and we're just starting to see some of that. And even the things coming out of Bradshaw Ranch, even the things coming out of Blind Frog Ranch right down the road.
They don't talk about Stardust Ranch, though.
Interesting. Not a whole lot. A whole lot.
I understand Bigelow was interested in Stardust, but it just kind of died on the vine, as it were.
Well, and, once again, really interesting to see some of these scientific endeavors into this concept. The one thing that I keep bringing up over the last couple of years is quantum entanglement winning the Nobel Peace Prize, and how that goes back directly to the work of Hal Puthoff and what led to remote viewing and the idea of
staring at a goat and making its heart stop.
Well, us being quantumly connected. The idea of, no, really time is a construct. It's not an actual thing in physics. It's part of an equation, but it's totally relative to the observer, which means it's changing, it's malleable. Does it actually exist? It
can really cause headaches.
It can.
If you look into it too much, because that's when you get these guys that start up with that, if a tree falls in the
but it is interesting to see that, once again, these realms of science, scientific technology, and even dimensional science are starting to come right where the paranormal has been for decades.
Which makes me wonder, you've got these people, they believe in quantum physics, they believe in all these things, and you tell them, well, what about ghosts? Those aren't real.
And, and I am of the same mind as you. It's a little much for me, and that's one of the reasons why I say it on the show all the time, why I am a fan of the relabeling to UAP. Because, as soon as you label it phenomenon, now it is part of that scientific process.
To me, it's too much in 1984.
Well, for me, it's the fact of you now landed it directly in the backyard of science. I would not have made an A in chemistry if I could not account for the missing 5% of solution. Did it off-gas? Did it become sediment? Did it go to an exothermic reaction? I see 95% of your equation.
Mouse drink it.
But we've got 5% missing. Go find the anomaly now. That's the job of the scientist, is now to find not the known quantitative of the solution and the reaction, but what happened to the 5%. Because this keeps happening in the experiment. We keep losing 5%, so now you've got that anomaly that you have to search for. And that's kind of the job of science, is to search for that anomaly. When you put everything into a Kleenex box and just call it paranormal, it's hard for them to have an active interest in science,
You've got the paranormal people, and then you've got the scientists that will actually look into it.
Yeah.
And then you've got what I call the boys in the white lab coats. They're the ones that...
Nothing to do with it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And that's just it. And that's why it's interesting to see the fact that, yes, quantum physicists are interested in this side. The people dealing in quantum entanglement, things like that, very fascinated with this research.
Spooky matter at a distance.
Because it's things that literally alter the fabric of the universe. They alter the fabric of our understanding of the universe. And we know that other dimensions exist. That's been scientifically proven. So it's phenomenal to think that these things are literally ghosts, aliens, what have you, are literally adjunct to us at all times. It's just whether or not vibrationally they manifest here where we're at, or whether or not we vibrationally match where they're at to be able to see each other at the same time, You
hear a story about a person sees a ghost, and it's like the ghost just zips on by, not even aware they're being observed.
Yeah.
Then you hear another story where there was that plumber in England. Can't remember which part of England. And he saw a legion of Roman soldiers marching down the road.
Yeah.
And he said they were all staring at him like,
what the hell are you doing here?
Who's that guy digging the hole?
Yeah. Why don't you have a shield?
Why do some ghosts behave one way and others another?
Yeah, exactly. Why do some seem to be locked in some kind of time loop? Others do not. Some interact with the world around them. others do not.
It's like the guy that me and my wife saw.
Well,
He didn't realize we were there. He was going from point A to point B, and we just happened to be standing to the side, and he went right past in front of us.
wow.
And then disappeared.
Wow.
I don't know if that was a loop or what, because I've never heard anybody else report a similar sighting in
Yeah.
that area. We're in a hospital, a new hospital. He got on an elevator. The elevator never moved, but he was not in the cab when the door opened.
Yeah.
And it was only closed for like 2 seconds.
I sat in a hotel room at the Minger Hotel in San Antonio with a friend of mine. We came back. We prepped all the gear for an interview, went down to the bar to get a drink, came back. There was a single spot of blood on the bed. Not even joking. Single spot of blood on the bed. Was not there when we left. All white sheets. And it was like, okay, that's weird. We did an episode of his show in the room, took off our headphones, sat down with our drinks, and as we did, the crystal door handle to the bathroom turned and the door opened. Private bathroom, not a shared bathroom, nobody else in the room. So it's one of those, like, we were both there. We were both like, you saw that, right? Yes, yes, I did. I said, hey, we're all cool with you, whatever you are. But I went down and started talking before I left at about 1 a.m. Ended up talking with the security guard until about 4. And 70-year-old guy who'd been working night shifts for like 30 years at the Minger Hotel, and just, oh my God, the stories he told, the people just leaving at 3 a.m. Like, we're done. We're out. Like, our bags are packed. We're supposed to check out 2 days from now. See ya, dude. We're done with San Antonio. And it's interesting to see places like that that are continuously going through that. And even one of the things that I posited regularly on the show, Chris, is especially the work of Hal Puthoff, that first paper that he put out that led to the work of remote viewing, the concept of what if scientists, while they go home and think about their experiment, are adversely affecting their experiment. The whole idea of, did I burn my house down because I keep thinking, did I leave the iron on? And you think it so much that the iron turns on and burns your house down. Could it be the fact that while people are preparing their equipment for an expedition, for a research night, things like that, that as you're thinking about the location, as you're thinking about stories, as you're thinking about, like, I've heard this, I've heard that, you may actively be psychically charging that atmosphere before you ever step into it.
Well, whenever we're doing an investigation, if it's a public event, guest event, we always ask who's scared. And if anybody says they're scared, they go first.
Yeah.
Because we're betting on the fact that their energy, their tension, their
will stir
beliefs,
something up.
Yes, will bring something to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, oh, you're the guy that's afraid of ghosts. Hi.
Yeah, you're the apprehensive one.
Yeah,
come
hopefully.
lead us all. And yeah, even the idea of that, using that to stir the pot before you come in, it's the idea of, we may well be psychically charging that atmosphere before we ever step into it with an instrument.
It does make you wonder about, though, when you have ghost sightings or things in a place where there's never been a ghost sighting, brand new structure, there's no history, and the people having the sighting aren't thinking about it.
Yeah.
There's it was brand new. It's not new anymore. It was a sports arena in Laredo.
Okay.
It had been up a couple of years. The cleaning staff saw a woman walk into the bathroom on the second tier. And they're like, wait a minute, it's the middle of the night. What's she doing in here?
Yeah.
They went and they looked, and there's nobody in the bathroom. They heard the toilet flush. They heard the water come on. And the whole cleaning staff, they're all like...
So the ghost knew how to use indoor plumbing. There's a date point there and forward, It
was a female, but what caused that?
Yeah, no,
because nobody's thinking ghosts. Nobody's thinking, "Oh, this is a scary place."
Not an occupied property prior to just an open field,
cattle field.
Yeah, and what causes that, or who drags that along with them? You know, and that's even an interesting concept. The idea of when things get connected with energy. You know, that was a whole that was the whole plot line of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, was the fact that this energy was attached to objects, you know, and that objects could be a key to hauntings. And it's a hypothesis that's been put out there for a long time, you know, the idea that something was so personal to somebody that it becomes imbued with their energy,
I try to
or
avoid
becomes a point
antiques.
of connection.
I don't want antiques. I don't want somebody
Right.
else's luggage.
Well, and it's funny, you know, even it's something that we'll probably be discussing with Mitchell Whittington, because he goes into a lot of the funerary industry in America and things like that. And even the idea of not too long ago, man, or the change of parlor to living room. The idea of, we used to have home funerals. It was a very customary
it was always in
thing
the
and very
parlor.
regular thing. You know,
That's why houses had 2 doors.
Yeah, absolutely, and why you covered mirrors, you know, things
you carried
like that
the body
during
out
the point
feet
of
first.
mirroring. It just, all these little things that our society has only, when you look at the scope of humanity, only recently spiritually changed in that way, you know? So to think of that disconnection, especially when it comes to mourning, when it comes to a ghost possibly passing the way that they should, something like that, that plays a big part in it. I personally believe so. The fact that we get attached to each other, we get attached to items, you know, things like that.
Well,
So
you hear about people that had a particular pet
yeah,
that they were very attached to, and that pet was very attached to them.
yep.
The pet's no longer with them, and all of a sudden they've got evidence that it's still hanging around.
You know, oddly enough, we recently lost an elderly cat in our home. Been around for about 13 years. He was the older brother of our baby cat, who's only about 3 years old. Baby cat has never been a cuddler. He has never been a lap cat, anything like that. The big cat that we lost was my wife's baby. Like he crawled up on her. He was 20 pounds and still crawled up on her like he was a kitten. Within about a week of him passing, the other cat came and became a lap cat.
I've seen that happen.
And like he literally said, he passed calmly in the house with us surrounding him. Baby cat was there, and I am utterly convinced of the fact that he was like, you need to keep loving mom the way mom needs to be loved. This is how she, because he never crawled up on us ever before then, until now. And it's absolutely strange to see that behavior happen, where it's like suddenly he is a cuddled lap cat, where before he was never about it. And he won't do it to me, only to her.
I had a cat named Betty, tuxedo cat. She was the mystery cat. You knew she was in the house, but you never knew where she was. She was always hiding somewhere.
Yeah.
Gladys was the lap cat. When Gladys died, all of a sudden Betty had to sit in your lap all the time.
Yeah. And
before that, never saw her.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see that. It's interesting to see the way that that's passed on, and the way that, you know, they mourn just like we do, and they see that. It's remarkable. Chris, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Let everybody know where they can go to get a hold of the Laredo Paranormal Investigative Society, where they can go to get a hold of you guys if there's a case, where they can go to get a hold of all your books.
Our website, the LPRS website, is Laredo Paranormal
Research.
Just Laredo Paranormal at, I think it's Gmail. Darn it. Can't remember. They're on Facebook.
Yeah,
Facebook Messenger will do the job.
Yeah, Google Laredo Paranormal Society and you will find him.
We don't, the email, I don't know if hardly anybody ever even checks it anymore. It's been, nobody uses it.
Yeah.
Because nobody can remember what it is. If they want to hear more from me, I do a podcast once a week called Strange Things with Chris James. But you have to put the whole name in because there's 45 podcasts with strange things, yes. My books, you can find them on Amazon. There are probably a dozen Chris Jameses who write books. So the easiest way to find them is to type in Laredo Paranormal Research Society, and then all the other books are attached.
All right.
And my latest book, UFOs, it's just UFO stories.
Yeah, and some great stuff. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you having me.
Appreciate you coming on.
You bet.
Absolutely. While you are online checking out everything from Chris James and the Laredo Paranormal Research Society, folks, make sure to stop on by Curious Realm. CuriousRealm.com is where you can like, follow, subscribe, comment, share. That's where you can find the Curious Realm app, where you can tune in. You can also tune in on our Roku. We have a Roku app full of not only the episodes, but tons of binaural beat music that we make, all kinds of stuff. Stay tuned through this quick break. We'll be back with our continuing coverage of the Texas UFOCon right here in Jefferson after this, folks.
The key to good science is good research. At the heart of good research is a good data set. With the field observation and encounter log from Curious Research, you can easily keep track of your investigative information all in one place, making it easier to review cases and readily see comparisons and contrasts between them. Whether out in the woods squatching, in a back room gathering EVPs, or using high-tech gear to track UFO, UAP activity, this easy-to-carry, pocket-sized scientific data log is the perfect companion for any field researcher. You can find your copy of the Curious Research Field Observation and Encounter Log at Amazon.com or visit the official Curious Realm store at CuriousRealm.com/store to reserve your copy for yourself, your family, or a mind that you want to open. That website again is CuriousRealm.com/store.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Curious Realm's continuing coverage of the Texas UFOCon here in Jefferson, Texas. We have the great pleasure of being joined by our good friend Daniel Allen Jones from the Vortex. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Chris. Great to be back here.
Always great to see you. It's always awesome having you as MC at these events. You do such a great job, and you were actively here presenting on Texas UFO cases today. Let's get into a few of those.
Sure, yeah, I think it's great to be able to have this type of event. This is the third one we've been able to cover all types of different cases, not just from throughout the state only here in Texas, but beyond. We had a really interesting overview of the Cape Girardeau case of 1941 by Mitchell Whitington, and it's something that, you know, just goes to show that while here in Texas there are several historic cases, there are so many out there in the rest of the world too. But when it does come to the Lone Star State and these incredible encounters, there's a variety of different things people have seen, witnessed, experienced, encountered, and so I've researched a number of these cases to some extent, either by interviewing people, looking at some of the literature that's gone out there, or gone out and done some field investigative work that shows that you know, there's some interesting stuff to consider when it comes to the validity of some of these cases, whether it's there are forms of tangible evidence that people have collected, groups, different organizations that have attempted to do this type of work to see what's really going on with some of these things. And so what I've done is I've collated that information and provided a sort of chronology of history behind Texas's most renowned cases. Of course, they're, you know, with it being one of the largest states here in the United States, you know, with so many people, there's any number of UFO sightings, and reports are probably not nearly as close to the number of real sightings people have, just because people don't always follow up with something they had happen to file a report. But out of the ones that we do know are out there that have been documented, there are some pretty incredible things that have happened. So going way back, you know, you can think about some of the interesting cases that, you know, we know from the flying saucer era on forward. But before all of that, one of the interesting things that happened in 1878 was with a farmer named John Martin, and he described an object which used the term saucer to describe a quality of its movement.
Interesting.
And so before we have Kenneth Arnold in 1947 talking about these crescent-shaped objects over Mount Rainier in Washington moving like saucers, which got spun by the media into flying saucer, here we have John Martin in North Dallas talking about, you know, seeing this object that was like a saucer. And so I think, you know, it's kind of fun to say we can claim stake here in Texas to the, you know, original saucers out there. And that just goes to show this dates way back. And so that's kind of a fun an anecdote from 1878 there in the Denison Daily News.
And even before the Aurora incident, which you've talked about so many times at conferences, from 1897.
That's a big part too. Of course, the focus I've had for a long time on my research project has been with the Aurora legend. It's not the only airship story. There are several in Texas that go, ranging from all of 1897, and so that one probably stands out the most. But there are others all over the state, and newspapers at the time were writing all kinds of different stories about what was going on with these airships. Some would describe the crew, some would describe propellers, just more dirigible, real airship type crafts that seem to be made by maybe more or less inventors rather than Aurora's spaceman. But the fun thing is some of these talk about, like one in Merkel, Texas, talks about an anchor that was left in town, and they put it up in town square and had it out on display for a while. And so some of these airship stories are pretty neat to see, because they don't maybe have the sensational exotic quality of it being related to an extraterrestrial, but it does show that many of these places around the state and beyond, of course, we're talking about the airships outside of just the Aurora story. So that really spans from 1896, 1897. Afterward, there's really not much of the airship wave. It was just something that, really took the whole nation by storm for about a year or two, and then it died down. And of course, we had the real airships that were being made, and the public scope of things. And then, of course, you've got the Wright brothers and the Flyer and all that. So modern aviation comes into the picture, and there are a few cases that are really hard to track down, but in the 20s and the 30s, but my focus with the chronology kind of jumped ahead into the 40s. But I should say that my buddy and author Noe Torres has done a great job and also detailing a lot of the early and hard to find stories in some of his books about UFOs before the 50s and 60s. And so that would be some I would definitely recommend for anyone to check out. Just the stories out there are, not as well known, but they're worth at least making a note of, that this is it's an ongoing phenomenon. But jumping ahead into the 40s, there's a lot of interesting stuff that's happened. I do mention how sometimes the Aurora story is an ongoing bit of history, just with the new families moving in and those sort of things happening. So I did kind of detail a lot of those types of things along the way. But most people, when they think of UFOs, they think Roswell, or they think Area 51 and stuff like this. The fun thing about Roswell was that the debris from whatever did happen was loaded up and taken over to the Carswell Army Airfield in Fort Worth, Texas, close to where I am, near my hometown, and put on display for a public media shoot where, they took pictures, and you have General Roger Ramey and Jesse Marcel holding up what looks like tinfoil, some of those infamous pictures that people always refer to.
Tinfoil and balsa wood. And
So, I think it's kind of interesting to note the connection there between the Roswell and Texas Association. So those photos are pretty renowned for people who keep up with the subject, but those were actually taken in Fort Worth, Texas, and some people say that was all hauled off to Wright-Patterson, and you have the Hangar 18 stories and all this. But one of the other interesting side tangents to that was that the idea of occupants of bodies, aliens, things like this, that there were autopsy videos. Apparently, there were some photographers doing video or photography for some kind of occupant or body or alien, however it had been referred to, in Fort Worth. And I think that's really curious, because that's not really as well known. So a lot of the material behind the alien autopsy that's kind of been around the internet for a while, that spins off of these stories of Roswell and things, does actually involve Fort Worth in some way. And so Philip Mantle, who's a publisher in the UK, has written extensively on a lot of these. He's talked about Pascagoula and these types of things. He wrote a lot and worked a lot on looking into the alien autopsy videos and the legitimacy or anything behind that. So there does seem to be some kind of relationship between Texas and specifically Fort Worth, that there could have potentially been a video made of an alien autopsy, real or fake, in Fort Worth at some point. So that's kind of interesting to think of as well. And going into the kind of more modern time frame after the 40s and 50s, that's when UFOs really, the flying saucer craze really took effect.
Yeah, it's when the zeitgeist hit, for certain.
Yeah, and I think that you have a bigger interest overall with the community of people who began to think of this as a field of study and ufology, and started to actually look back at these old cases and think, well, maybe there's something to these historic incidents of strange encounters. So one of the biggest ones at this time, you have a number of things happening in the late 40s, and you even have one in Laredo, which we had Chris Lee James talking about. It was in 1948, and there's tons of different stories like this, but one of the things that really stood out was a few years later in 1951, you've got the Lubbock Lights. And the Lubbock Lights garnered enough attention by Project Blue Book. And this is a program that was put together by the Air Force to study and investigate UFOs. Of course, many people have probably heard of it at some point, or more especially Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who was a professor of astronomy, got pulled into this project to help and really kind of dissuade the whole, association with UFOs being aliens. And
this is where we get swamp gas explanations, things like that. Which even he said, these are aberrant explanations. These are far-fetched explanations, but they very well could be. But even he backtracked years later and was like, many of these we have are unexplained.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's enough information to show that Hynek was genuinely interested in the UFO subject and continued on to make the Center for UFO Studies after his involvement there. But he also, I think, found out that a lot of the more serious reports were not just case closed. They were actually going on to different potential bodies of interest. So, there is something to it. And he realized that he was being manipulated for sure. That'd be a good way to put it. And his son, Paul Hynek, who have come to know is really trying to help keep the momentum going, the Hynek legacy going in a way that he is very much of the outlook that his father was not just distrusting of the government, but because of what had happened, he had a distrust for the situation of how things were handled. And so I would say that that's important to preface the idea of the Lubbock Lights with, because this was investigated by Blue Book in a way that they had a show, fictionalized show on the History Channel, where this became one of the episodes, and it's fun to see just for a show. But the Phoenix Lights is a different thing. The Lubbock Lights, well before it, was something that was seen by not a few people, but actually some professors from the local technical college there who were seeing these things and took photos. There are photos out there, and it's kind of a triangular formation of like singular dots that all kind of form this shape. And the official explanation that was given was that these were birds reflecting lights from the town. That they had nude lights installed, and that maybe this was causing some kind of reflection, which, it's not impossible for certain things like birds to reflect lights, I suppose, but this is sort of a far-fetched idea that really put people, questioning whether they should be trusting of these official explanations. And so it makes us wonder, what really was that object? Was it an experimental craft? Was it some other type of phenomenon that's not a craft, a technology at all? Because they were wondering, some people were wondering, are these individual lights something that forms an enormous object, or were they just all working in tandem? So Lubbock Lights were an interesting set of lights that made this weird shape and made people wonder what was really going on, and it caught enough attention for them to investigate it back then. And this just keeps going, into the 50s. You've got a number of different cases where even a few years later, they have the what they called the Houston Batman. Yep. And it's kind of a weird crossover because it's not exactly a craft that we know of, but it seemed to be a strange case of a flying humanoid and
gargoyle type creature.
Our friend Ken Gerhard wrote about this as well. Basically, some people in the Houston Heights area were looking out and they saw this strange person that was glowing ascend up into a tree line, and as they looked, it seemed to be dark and wearing a sort of paratrooper type of outfit, and imploded in on itself, and then moments later something rocketed up in the sky down the street, and so maybe that was some kind of technological craft or object, but the association is strange, and it's not necessarily that they thought it was a spaceship or an alien, or they didn't really know what to think, but that does fall into the category of UFO in the more general sense that they don't really know what it was. And so it is interesting to see some of those sort of tangential cases like that are outside of the typical daylight disk or something to that effect. So the 50s is kind of filled with some of those interesting cases like that. You also have Leveland as well, which was like an egg-shaped object over in Leveland, Texas, that was disabling vehicles, and law enforcement was out there checking it out. Kevin Randall wrote a book about this recently that kind of chronicles the event as well. Into the 60s, there are a few other things, and I noted one of the interesting documents that surfaced over the years regarding John F. Kennedy deals with his request to be informed on all UFO matters to the CIA just 10 days before he was assassinated. So there's a document out there that shows that he was requesting information about UFOs to the CIA only 10 days before he was killed. And, now that might seem like I'm insinuating that that's why it happened. And, I don't know. I think there's a lot of factors why he was unfortunately killed in public, but it's one of those things that it's hard to look past that as one of the challenges that we face as someone in his capacity as not just an official capacity, but the president of the United States, to be requesting information from an intelligence agency about a subject which has often been relegated to science fiction and the fringe, and which is now ironic because now Congress is all about this type of thing. And the presidents that we've had for a while haven't really been as proactive as maybe people would like with it. And I think there's some reasons for that. But just seeing JFK in a memo talking about this on an official document is pretty neat. And that happened, supposedly about 10 days before he passed away. So I mentioned that because it's part of the history of the officialdom when it comes to the subject too. But up in North Texas, you have places like Sherman, but also in Damon, where law enforcement and other people were witnessing different objects. One in Sherman was like an amorphous object that there's a photo of that law enforcement saw. In Damon, some people saw a triangular craft. And it's just to demonstrate that by sharing these cases that the UFOs aren't always just flying saucers, that they are a variety of shapes, and that there are statistics that have been done to show that things like triangular UFOs are actually pretty common, or more common than people realize. And so there are a lot of different interesting cases like this out there, and kind of trailing through that late 60s into the early 70s. This is kind of the time frame when the Aurora story was getting publicized again and became back into public awareness. And when you have a story about not just a sighting, but specifically a crash, material, debris, wreckage, bodies, burial, and that's exciting for a lot of people who are interested, because at that time, ufology in its own respective sort of field had already been catching a lot of attention to people who were into it at the time, enough so that people hearing about the Aurora story, which was being written in the newspapers and things, they said, wow, I think I want to go and be able to look into this. It wasn't just a one-time thing that people saw in the sky and that was it, but apparently the story suggests a lot more. And so in that time frame, the late 60s, early 70s, you had people descending upon Aurora, as we've talked about in other shows, that wanted to go and try to do a little bit of treasure hunting and metal detecting and see if there's really anything to it. In extreme cases, try to really see if there's an alien body there.
Literally dig things up.
Right. Yeah. So, I think it goes to show that the idea of UFOs and moreover crash retrievals, non-human intelligence, bodies, these types of things like this, the evidence is what people are always after. And these stories kind of insinuate that there is something to it. And I think it gives people hope. It gives people the inspiration to kind of look into that. And I think that the resurfacing of the Aurora story helped to really jumpstart a lot of interest in a way that people took this non-tangible subject into a way that became like a really interactive type of part of their life, that they can go out into this place and do something about to the best of their ability. So it's interesting to see that. Of course, into the 70s, there's a lot of other curious things that have happened. Another similar, or at least interesting type of events that took place was down in South Texas, near the valley down there, Raymondsville, Brownsville, and San Antonio. They all had these sightings in 1976 of what they called the Big Bird. Some people call it the Thunderbird. And people might be wondering how this is relevant, because we often have the connotation of UFO being an alien spaceship when it really just means unidentified. So people were seeing an unidentified animal flying up in the sky. And the strange thing about this case in 76 was that it wasn't just any animal that they were describing. It seemed to be like a pterodactyl in nature, which is bizarre in and of itself.
Leathery in appearance. And
you have these weird qualities that people were, and actually school teachers, and there's some interesting articles that were written that have been looked into, and our friend and colleague Ken Gerhard wrote a book. His first book on this was Big Bird, and it looked into these aerial creatures in a way that people were wondering, what are these? Is there really something to the idea of like living fossils still out there? And that's exciting. It seems very sensational in some ways, but people are describing some kind of weird animal that they can't readily identify. So it under that guise does fall under sort of the term of UFO. And it might not be a technical object, but it might be an unknown flying animal or something. So
could be.
There's some interesting ideas of how that does branch over and cross over into cryptozoology or studies of unknown animal encounters and things like this.
Sure.
So I do think that there are some bridges between different fields of interest. So that's kind of something that you see happen in this in 76, and moving on from there and into the the 80s. I think what's really important about one of the more notable Texas cases is that in 1980 you have two ladies and one of their grandchildren driving on an old road north of Houston, basically trying to come back from looking to play bingo and have a regular night, and in doing so they look up and they see a glowing object, and they also hear a thunderous sound and see these helicopters, and that's very startling. And the little boy asks his grandma, "What is that?" And she replies, "Don't worry, it's Jesus. It's the second coming." And this is incredible because unfortunately it turned out to not be that, unfortunately, and they don't really know exactly what it was, but what they could discern as it got closer and unfortunately came down in front of the road that wouldn't allow them to proceed any further was that it was to their description, sort of a square or diamond-shaped object that was glowing with light or fire or flames almost coming down and burning the road below, and they felt this immense searing heat that started to become very hot and noticeable, and they could tell that these helicopters were with it. The association with those helicopters was really important because, in a nutshell, they saw this thing. They got out of the car for a moment. One of the ladies pressed their hand into the dashboard, and it left an imprint that sort of melted, and that was really a notable quality. Eventually, the strange diamond-shaped object that seemed to be in distress came up, and it went on, and the whole group of helicopters continued on.
Because they reported that it was spewing material, things like that like sparking stuff off of it.
Right, and there are transcripts where you can hear these ladies, Betty Cash and Vicki Landrum and her grandson Colby Landrum. Colby's the only one alive now, but they all went home and they were ending up with their hair falling out, with blisters, throwing up, very sick, and obvious signs of radiation. And I think because of the association with the helicopters, they never insinuated that they thought it was extraterrestrial or alien, in nature. They almost immediately suspected that it was the government or military. Enough so that they attempted to sue the Air Force. And they never really... There's some challenges and discrepancies about the medical situation that happened afterward, but there's a really interesting book about it called the Cash-Landrum UFO by John Schuessler, who had been involved with MUFON for a number of years. He investigated it. There was a clandestine cleanup crew that came up and fixed or changed, modified or altered the road somehow.
A whole swath of road.
And our good friend Ann Walls, who's been involved with some various investigative work, she lives nearby, and she's known some of the people who've lived in that area and were there around the time it happened, and knew about the helicopters and knew about the spot that was left on the road. But apparently that road's been cleaned up a lot. I've been able to go down there, and you wouldn't tell if you didn't know about the story that the road had these things happen. So it's one of the most notable cases, not only just because of the effects that were incurred with these ladies and the kid being in such close proximity to this object, but what's also very synchronous about it is that half a world away at the exact same time, mind you, this is December 29th of 1980.
Yep.
So at this same time, in Suffolk, England, you have the Rendlesham Forest case. This is England's most well-known and well-documented
and
UFO
one
case.
of the most well-documented UFO cases, period.
Right. And I don't know that there's any real direct connection. It's just odd that they happened at the exact same time.
And it's also kind of odd that the crafts have almost the same appearance, that they're both like diamond shaped.
Yeah, the Rendlesham Forest one talks about sort of a tripod of a landing that was measured, that they did see some kind of impression or like an indentation in the ground that they looked at. And the weird thing about both cases is that you have people who were in close proximity with this unknown object and had some effect.
Had health effects.
And, even the Rendlesham Forest people are not all on the same page about what happened. One person says he touched the object. This is Jim Penniston. He says he touched it and got a download of binary, which had some interesting thing like coordinates and all of this stuff. And then you have other people, Jonathan Burroughs, who basically had been denied adequate medical attention because they weren't able to reveal the source of the radiation.
Yeah.
And the challenge with that is because it was on, a military space that they couldn't just outright tell. So Senator John McCain at the time had to help them in declassifying some of the material that they were able to use to get medical attention. So de facto revealing it was due to UAP or UFOs. And so it's interesting to see what that type of involvement can do in some way. But again, kind of rounding back to the Texas side of things, it does make you curious. If this wasn't an alien spaceship, because it's easy to use that as a way to say anything mysterious is alien, because it's just a catch-all. But in the event that it was like a secretive craft or an experimental type of technology that was using, some people say it came out of Area 51. Some people say it was using nuclear propulsion and was something was going on. It wasn't working right. And you can imagine the people in those helicopters. Maybe they didn't even have any idea about what was really going on. They're just there to do their job too. And unfortunately, who knows if they got radiated or not, and if they even knew how to describe what it was.
Likely have no legal recourse. The prime example is the families of Area 51, the people of Rachel, Nevada, that actively sued and won a case against the federal government for burning of toxic materials from stealth experiments and stuff. You didn't hear anything about any employees in that lawsuit who were there in the burn pits. You didn't hear about any contractors getting to get their health benefits taken care of in that lawsuit.
Yeah, so it's unfortunate that anyone is having these things happen and doesn't really, maybe they don't have a way to follow up with it, especially, because they can't say where the source of this radiation, if it seems to be radiation, is actually coming from, and that's too bad.
Well, and I mean, that's another prime example. That lawsuit is literally how we found out that Area 51 was a real place. Without that lawsuit, it would still be a place under wraps that's used for military testing. They literally had to say okay, there's a place there. Yeah, it's called Area 51. We test things there. Sorry you were hurt by the off-burning of materials, but it led to the declassification of Area 51 as a known location now. Before that, it was myth. It was hearsay, It was a totally disavowed location before then.
One of the other things about the Cash-Landrum incident that sort of an eye-opener and makes people, it can open up a ton of cans of worms, but it's the idea that, this makeshift group of helicopters, they said they counted 23 helicopters, and it's like, wow, when would anyone ever see that many helicopters ever? Maybe an air show, but maybe a dozen
if you were part of an incursion force, maybe.
So unless you're actively involved in some kind of
military exercise,
something like that, right? I think that it's hard for anyone to know that they've seen that many helicopters all at once ever. And I think that people wonder, well, that's one thing, but where did they all come from and so quickly, if that's the case, to know that, they were either escorting, retrieving, or pursuing this object, because we don't know if they were actually all together at the start or if they actually had to come in and try to retrieve it or help it out. So there's been lots of rhetoric about the idea that it later came and went off over toward Louisiana or something, and that maybe that there's a facility or perhaps multiple facilities that can quickly get these types of numbers out there.
Ellington would have been the closest airfield with anything like that, next to maybe, and I don't even know if at that point, because I grew up in South Houston, or Southwest Houston, right over near Highway 6. My high school, Tully Stadium, was the staging ground for the Air National Guard and National Guard, things like that. Like all their helicopters took off from Attucks Dam right down the road. So whether or not that installation was open at the time, I don't know when that incident happened. But aside from that, it would have been Ellington Field right down the road near, where they have the air shows, near Galveston, stuff like that. That would have been the closest military airfield to where the Cash-Landrum incident happened for rapid response of helicopters.
Yeah, I mean, so people wonder, and it's, obviously there's a lot of free association that can take place, and people can be very conspiratorial minded, but it makes people wonder where such a force could be
mounted
set off from, and
rapidly, especially with rapid deployment.
And that kind of makes me, in backing up a little bit, I'm going to backtrack. So
Please.
There's a few other interesting cases of note that kind of help paint a good picture of a lot of the different areas, because Texas is such a huge state. Going back a little bit, in '66, there was a story from Edinburgh, Texas, that deals with some workers from Dallas, but were working in a caliche pit, basically trying to get gravel, and had some construction material and dwellings. And apparently something started happening in the sky that was causing a lot of commotion, and there was an explosion in the sky. And so something apparently happened that started to burn their materials in their dwelling, and they had phoned in the sheriff, and the local sheriff came out the next day with his son, and they noticed that these workers were so scared that they just left, and they don't know if anything ever really happened to them. No one's ever been able to follow up with who exactly these people were, but they described something in the sky that exploded and caused a fire and just destroyed some of their work equipment. And some of the questions that were raised were dealing with, like, was there an insurance claim filed or anything? But this is in '66, and so this area now is interesting because it's an area that's on a private property that some people own. The city of Edinburgh, for the last 13 or so years now, has been doing a UFO festival and conference to help commemorate the event, but also to bring people out to the location to be at a place that had some strange incident like this to see for themselves. And there might still be some of the burnt and charred material and remains that have been found. I mentioned Noe Torres earlier. He's a local there in Edinburgh. He's sort of the local specialist when it comes to this case, and he's written a new book about that as well, called Fire from the Sky.
Oh, wow.
There's, of course, the movie Fire in the Sky about Travis Walton and his notable abduction experience and all that, but he kind of did a play on the name Fire from the Sky, because apparently some of these construction materials and the machinery and the dwellings are all burnt and destroyed. So no one knows if those 8 workers from Dallas got radiated or are okay or even alive now, but that was in '66. A few years later, South Texas area, Palacio, basically in '73 had declared that they wanted to do some UFO landing and invite any visitors, and they had a massive flyover of some weird bubble red object fly over a football game. And then a few days later, they declare that they'll have a landing zone for all, visitors like that. So it's interesting to see some of those, like the declarations from a bit of an official stance on a lot of those types of ideas. And one of the other things I mentioned, we talk about Aurora sometimes on the show, but in the scope of when I mentioned the family moved onto the property, they the whole idea that the crash happened and the debris was discarded down the well and body buried in the cemetery, all that. Well, a new family moved on that property, and the whole idea is that they wanted to use the well, which supposedly had that metal from the airship and all this. They used that well for drinking for 12 years before they sealed it up in 1957. And Brawley Oates and his family, they said that they used the water for drinking and whatever else, and that Brawley Oates basically claimed that he incurred really bad maladies and injuries like arthritis on his hands to what he said was drinking that water that he thought was radiated from the spaceship crash. And he started to come forward with that information in about 73 as well.
Yeah.
And whether that's the case or not, I don't think there's any medical records to substantiate that. But he passed away in 78. And, and it's interesting, his family has said some things and made comments about how some of his statements may have been taken out of context, but that's what he said in multiple interviews.
It's hard to take it out of context when you directly say, like, this happened to me because of the water in my well and because of the stuff in it.
Yeah, so...
Like, literally the words that came out of his mouth.
I think one of the things people who are into this subject, they hear when someone's affected by something and they say, well, yeah, because, these other cases show that there are people getting radiated and there's all these injuries and things like that. So, I mean, if that's really happening and it's easier for people to associate the idea of being too close to something that will cause some problems, then it makes sense in that point of view or that line of thinking to say that, well, maybe Brawley had something happen, but that took place in the 70s as well. And then, of course, they had that pretty campy movie in the 80s that came out.
Yeah.
It's kind of a fun movie like E.T.
It's a larf. It's a larf.
Yeah, and so that was in 86. And, of course, just being the notable airship story that it is, it's one of the most reported otherworldly encounters.
Well,
ever.
And I mean, and all of that brings us directly into the present day, where we're talking about things like the Stephenville sighting,
right,
which made national news, much like the Phoenix lights whenever it happened, where F-16s were chasing things around in the sky, stuff like that. Actual radar reports of something in the skies over Stephenville.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the most notable flap in the study of
history.
UFOs, ufology, all these types of things. When people are referring to a UFO flap, they're talking about an enormous sighting, not just of something seen by one or a few people. In this case, it was a
town of people.
And you have law enforcement, you have various people who have credentials and all this, so it makes people realize, okay, when you have a lot of people saying the same thing, there's something to it. And some people would say it was like a flying Walmart, going from horizon to horizon effortlessly and just enormous. And so one of the other challenges with this case is that it was also one by association that had military jets with it, and people wondered if they were pursuing the object or they were escorting it or something. And I think some people had said, well, it seems pretty clear that because of how quickly it was moving, that these jets weren't escorting this object. They were not able to keep up with it at all. And so the jets seem to be sent out from Carswell, which now, it wasn't Carswell then, but used to be, so you have the joint facility there, who originally said that they didn't have anything. Later they were like, okay, well, we detract that. We're going to say we had 2. And then that came 6 and like 10 jets all in the sky. And, this was an object tracked on radar. And for some people, that's considered hard evidence, and I think it's really important to see that. That
is a scientific instrument.
Yeah, it's something that recorded whatever was happening for sure. So it wasn't just a mirage.
It wasn't just a mass hallucination by a bunch of people seeing a flying Walmart.
So, I think that what's really incredible about that is that you have people that were in MUFON at the time go down there, talk to everybody, and there's a lot of other individuals who were involved as well, but Ken Cherry, who was the Texas State Director for MUFON for a number of years, along with people like Assistant State Director Steve Hudgens and a lot of other folks who came in, James Chatley, who was a field investigator, they were really interested in trying to help get this information out there. The challenge is that you basically have MUFON, who, as an organization, was upset with Ken and some of the other people for releasing and doing public press releases ahead of the release of information about the case report for MUFON. And because of this, you have a massive falling out of MUFON. You have several state directors who were asked kindly to put that way to let them go. And so Ken went on to form a new group called EPIC. I actually got involved with that. That's how I found out about a lot of these things going on. And so that was really interesting. But Stephenville in 2008, which is southwest of the Fort Worth area, about an hour and a half. And this is something that people say that they're doing maneuvers out there. There's military things happening. And I think it's something that, people can still learn about today because it's been seen on some of the recent productions like the encounters show,
Yeah.
and it's something
Yeah.
that people can see. Like, there's a lot to this. So, I think, and Ken wrote a book called the Stephenville UFO, and there's a lot, you can learn about that wasn't really as public or published at
Yeah.
the time as well. And, so Texas is full of these really interesting
Yeah.
things. Leading up to today, most of the time, people share about Starlink and things like this.
Yeah.
And that'll be tough for people, I think, still for a long time to start to come to terms with, like, okay, this is a regular thing we're going to have to learn about.
Yeah.
Managing a group, the Texas UFO Network, it's got thousands of people, and the most common published thing on there is probably Starlink.
Yeah.
And
I
that's
would
something
say
that's
so.
tough.
As a member, it's definitely that and stars.
Yeah.
That and stars.
It's helpful because I think people can use it as a learning opportunity
Yeah.
and a point to realize, okay, UFO is subjective. It's not just always going to be the exotic things
That's
that we
right,
want it to
that's
be.
right.
Well,
Well,
it's helpful for people to see, okay, maybe there are ways we can just explain it in a way that's not always wanting to look at it in that exotic way.
It's like we've said numerous times during this episode. It's like we said numerous times with you on the show before. When you disclude something from the scientific data set, does not mean it's not still part of the science. It's now a more integral part of the science. It's part of the known quantitative, which now only leaves the anomaly.
Right.
So when you put something in the category of known quantitative, don't be sad. Don't be sad. You've still contributed to the scientific data set of the anomaly.
Right.
More so than actually a picture of the anomaly, because now we have a better way to classify known quantitative. We have one more piece of evidence that shows known quantitative and how to rectify that.
Yeah.
That's hugely important to the science of the unknown.
And I'll just make a quick mention, just kind of coming full circle. The
Please.
history of some of these ideas does date back. And what I should have mentioned way at the beginning was, of course, the Marfa lights. And I'll just mention this because it's important that it wasn't just a singular issue, because people can go still today and go check them out.
I have video of them.
Yeah.
I have video of them and my own hypothesis of what they may be. But I have video of them and I've seen them. And my wife is not a believer in things like we are necessarily, but she saw them, Daniel, and her response. Like, we literally recorded an episode on the way back from seeing them. And she was just like, I'm flabbergasted. I don't know what to say because this is not something I'm into.
Well, I think, it's just important to mention in discussing all of these things, because not only is it, early before the airships and all that, it's not maybe your typical UFO by way of being that I think is a technical craft way up there. They're way out in the desert. It's a light phenomenon. Some people associate it with paranormal activity. Some people say it could be geophysical. It could be, a lot of types of things. Maybe piezoelectricity with the tectonic plating and all this. So a lot of interesting considerations, even scientific investigations, and even people mistaking car headlights for the actual light phenomenon too. So there are a lot of ways that people have interpreted it. And the thing is that it's not just one of those one moment type things where we look back. So I just say that because it's still a place you can go to today for anyone who's interested. You can always go check out these interesting historic sites and learn about something that did happen once. But you can also go to Marfa and go find some interesting things that are currently active, whatever they are.
With a repetitive experience.
There's not many places in the world like this, but we're fortunate here in Texas that, if you're willing to drive way out there, you can enjoy
worth the 8-hour drive.
They have a 24-hour rest stop with a little observation deck, so you can see out there. And it's really interesting. And I'll just say that, along with that, there are currently a few great events that help to to bring awareness to some of these historical cases.
Absolutely.
I mean, here we are at the 3rd Texas UFOCon, but there are also some pretty interesting things. The Edinburgh case I mentioned earlier does have an event that's a long-running event as well. They have a great festival and conference, and I think that anyone who's interested in, connecting with other like-minded individuals and learning about some of these things, to show up and to do what you can to, take part into the discussion and to really help, I think, provide a supportive network for people to feel comfortable in engaging in this otherwise challenging topic to get into.
Yeah. So. Daniel, thanks as always for your time, man. It's always great chatting with you, always great catching up. Let everybody know where they can go to keep up with all your work, where they can go to get onto the Aurora Wiki about the Aurora crash. Also, where they can go to follow the Vortex and everything you do, bud.
Sure. I'm pretty accessible on most social media platforms. You can just search my full name, Daniel Allen Jones. I also manage the Vortex media platform. You can just go to the YouTube channel on there. And the Aurora Legend is my latest endeavor for research projects. That's something you can go to at auroralegend.com, and it's just chronicling all the history of the legend and all the ways that it's been portrayed in media, and there's just going to be constant updates with that, and I'm glad to be able to help out. I know we've both been really involved with a lot of media and events and things, and so any of the presentations that were given today will eventually wind up on the Vortex, and you can see some of the past ones also on Curious Realm, and I'm glad to be able to kind of work in a way that's helping to share this information along with you, Christopher. So
Absolutely,
again, thanks so much for having me.
Oh, you're an integral part of this mission, my friend. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning into this segment. Make sure to stop on by the Vortex online. Make sure to stop on by the all-new Aurora Crash Site Wiki. While you're online checking all that out and getting a hold of Daniel Allen Jones, make sure to stop on by Curious Realm. CuriousRealm.com is where you can like, follow, subscribe, share, comment. That's where you can find us on just about every audio and video platform out there. Stay tuned through this quick break. We will be right back with our continuing coverage of Texas UFOCon right here in Jefferson, Texas, right after this.
The key to good science is good research. At the heart of good research is a good data set. With the field observation and encounter log from Curious Research, you can easily keep track of your investigative information all in one place, making it easier to review cases and readily see comparisons and contrasts between them. Whether out in the woods squatching, in a back room gathering EVPs, or using high-tech gear to track UFO, UAP activity, this easy-to-carry, pocket-sized scientific data log is the perfect companion for any field researcher. You can find your copy of the Curious Research Field Observation and Encounter Log at Amazon.com or visit the official Curious Realm store at CuriousRealm.com/store to reserve your copy for yourself, your family, or a mind that you want to open. That website again is CuriousRealm.com/store.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Curious Realm's continuing coverage of the Texas UFO Conference here in fabulous Jefferson, Texas. We have the great pleasure of being joined by Texas's own Daryl Sims, the alien hunter himself. Welcome to the show.
Well, I hope it's me. I'm wearing a shirt.
You have a magnanimous personality, no mistake, but you also have been in the world of paranormal investigation and also actual investigation as a private investigator, things like that, for many years. What is it that, because you were actively an experiencer yourself?
That's correct. I don't use the term experiencer. There are all kinds of terms. People use abductees, contact, all kinds of stuff. The reason I don't use the word experiencer, and it's perfectly fine if people do, is because I've investigated cases, tens of thousands of cases, over 50 years, from all over the world, and people get abducted. In other words, when I'm doing police work and I'm working an actual abduction, kidnapping, that's what it is. People never say to me, Daryl, there are good kidnappers and bad kidnappers.
Yeah.
I never get that.
True.
I always get, thank you for bringing my son back.
Yeah.
So for me, it definitely is an experience. But many times in the cases I work, people don't know what that experience is.
Yeah.
And I don't care if it's good, I don't care if it's bad. It's just evidence to me. Because that's all it boils down to.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just a story. So.
Well, and I've heard you say that numerous times, and I love that. Because I myself, I've had numerous experiences in my life, paranormal, all kinds of things. That's a lot of reason why I do this show, is because until proven otherwise, I will always believe the experiencer until evidence points to something else. And I look for the day that evidence points to something else of my experiences, be they religious or paranormal, that happened to me. I am perfectly open of mind to anything that can explain the experiences that I had. That's the path that I'm on in life, is to find that out. And you yourself once again, most people, we use the term experiencer, but yeah, most people have not invited the alien abduction experience into their life. It is something that has been forced upon them, which, leads to PTSD, leads to all kinds of issues in life, especially with investigators like yourself, people who are even police officers, things like that. When they see something, they have no means by which to report it without fear of losing badge, career, things like that. And that does something to a person in and of itself.
Well, even when I was in the CIA during the Vietnam War, I wasn't in Vietnam. I was in the Vietnam War time, and I was placed in the CIA in country for 2 years, and then I spent a year in Korea. Anyway, while I was in the company, I did not work for the company for the purpose of aliens and things like that.
Yeah.
But I still did UFO investigations because some of the people that I was connected with were abductees. And
oh, wow.
So that was, but I kept that completely private. And some of them were students at the University of what's the name of it? William and Mary College.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you know where I'm talking about.
Sure.
So I worked at the spy camp right near there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was there for 2 years. I was a martial arts instructor and a weapons instructor there. And they tried to recruit me to bring me back and said, you're what we want. And I thought, that's really weird. So
welcome to the Group W, bitch.
Not interested. I got out of that.
Okay.
I'm not interested.
Yeah.
Corrupting other people for the purpose of saving my country, making mine better, is not exactly the moral imperative that I thought I should have in life.
Sure. Yeah. The ends justifies the means is not always the case.
People are going to do it, and that's fine. But I'm not going to be the one to destroy your life in order for me to look good, so I can get a better GS rating and help my country do whatever I need to do, whatever I think that is, or whoever up there thinks that is. I'm not interested in doing that.
Well, and when it comes to your abduction, Daryl, how did that experience change you? How did it change the way that you actively look at these situations?
Well, the event started in 1952, and I was 4 years old. And I'm just use terms. I just throw them out, and if it helps, fine, and whatever. But it was like I was switched on, and I'm not sure why that happened because the alien certainly wasn't interested in it. And I noticed he was walking toward the wall, away from me, and it is about 3 a.m, and there's an ambient light from our well house shines in my room, so I can see quite well, and I can see he's pure white. Well, who is that? And just as I said that, in my head, he turns around. I realize he can hear me.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, 4 years old, you don't know anything. You had no clue about life. So I don't know who it is. It's wintertime. It's freezing cold. I got my covers all around me, and he hasn't got any clothes on. So kids see things different than the adults do. Adults might say, oh, well, that's an alien from another world. I think I'll communicate with him, or I'm going to be scared, or whatever it is I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Kids don't do that. He's got these big, perfectly round eyes that are 1.5 inches across, perfectly round. Now look, where's his nose? He's got 2 little pinholes for a nose. Where's his ears? They're gone. A little slit for a mouth, a little tiny bony neck, and then he hasn't got any of these, and he hasn't got a belly button. Where's his TT?
Wow.
That's what kids notice.
Yeah.
You don't have any clothes on, kids want, where's your TT?
Totally.
They don't have a clue. They have so I was stunned by the whole event, trying to figure out what in the world, why is he in our house?
Yeah.
And I didn't realize he just brought me back.
Interesting.
And he's leaving, and I got switched on at the wrong time. I do that from time to time, and there's a reason for mentioning that. I call it hot micing. And people often ask me, how do you know somebody? How do you write books about this? You must have read everybody's books. I said, I haven't read anybody's books. Yeah. Why not? That's because everybody say, you've been reading all our stuff, print it. And I haven't read anybody's books, so I haven't printed anybody's anything. I said, the reason I know so much about the alien is because however it happened, accidental or otherwise, when I was 4, I was abducted, and I get the mental experience there.
Yeah.
But by the same token, there's another half of my brain that's sitting there listening to him talk to whoever he's talking to.
Yeah.
And I call it hot miking. In other words, it's like if you had a hot mic on the president and he said something he didn't want to say, and it's embarrassing.
Yeah, you're still patched in.
I'm still patched in, and I don't know how it happened. I have no idea. It's not a superior intelligence on my part, obviously. But you're not supposed to be laughing at me.
I'm sorry.
All right, that's it. All right, interview's over. Yep. So, but whatever it was, I learned how to redo that. And for my abduction events went on for 13 more years.
Wow.
Till I was 17, and I was still able to hot mic. So what hot mic means, for instance, I got an implant when I was 12. That's how I knew about implants. Not because I read it, because nobody had written about it. So I knew it in 1960 because I was conscious during the event. I never had hypnosis or anything like that.
Wow.
I remember my events. I was there. So my point is that in the hot miking during the implant part of it, I heard what they wanted me to hear. It won't hurt. You won't feel anything. Don't worry about it. We're here to help you, and all of that. Well, that's a lie. And so I'm listening to them talk to each other, and they're not saying that at all. And the weird thing is about when they give you information, or whether you get information from them, it's almost like it's multidimensional. You not only hear the words, the concepts in their head, but you understand the process. Now, I'm 12 years old, and I assure you, I did not understand the process, what they were talking about.
Sure.
I should not know that.
Yeah.
I went to college at MSU and studied in advanced psychology to find out what that was about.
Yeah.
And I got a profound answer. They're no more than 15 to 50 years ahead of us. Most people don't know that. Dr. Bob Wood's the only person I know that ever knew that. He asked me that, and I said, they're no more than 15, 50 years ahead of us. And he said, everybody said they're 1,000 years. I said, I don't care what they say. I know what they said, and I know what I know. I've studied this. It's what I do. And he said, those are the exact figures that I came to, Daryl.
Wow.
I said, how'd you do that? And I had him write that on an email so I could have proof, because people say, he never would have told you that. Yeah, he actually did.
And that's remarkable to think about, that they're only 15 to 50 years ahead of us.
Well, in my presentation, I'll cover that pretty quickly, and it's going to alienate people, so to speak, right off the bat, because everybody says, well, they're millions of years. I said, no, somebody's millions of years ahead of you. Whoever hatched, cloned, made, or manufactured these 7 type entities that are visiting us called aliens, they're not them.
Yeah.
Someone else is in charge. And I said, if you can't figure that out, I can't help you. You don't want to figure it out, I can't help you. And I don't want to. I'm happy with whatever you want to believe in.
Yeah.
But the fact is that that's not the true story. I'm an investigator. I have to have the rest of the story.
And it's interesting that you bring up the hatched concept, the idea that these are basically almost like genetic machines that are rehatched, reformed, things like that. Lynn Buchanan from Project Stargate is a good friend of the show, and speaking with him on the show about it, have you ever remote viewed aliens? He said yes, once. And the one thing that he saw was the fact that the Greys specifically, the little robot beings, as people call them, the ones that are very interested in how we transmit soul and how we're a vehicle for soul, that they basically had to, in order to become what they are, become a hive mind, had to give up individuality. So even though they have this amazing realm of technology, they have no means by which to be ingenious with it and apply it to new things. So they're sharing technology with us so that we as ingenious creatures can help them find new ways to apply their technology to help their species.
Well, one of our
interesting concept.
Yeah, it is. And one of my abductees was crying one night. She came and she said, they got me again. And I said, okay. And she's bawling and says, they're going to get my kids if I give you any more information. I said, why do you think that is? She says, what do you mean? I said, you think they're going to get them anyway? She says, yes. I said, then give me more information because they're going to get them anyway.
Yeah.
So anyway, she says, but you got to help me. I said, as a humanitarian, I do. And so I gave her certain skills that I had learned and developed over a long period of time. And she, when the alien came the next time, about a month later, she took control of him.
Interesting.
And she said, I couldn't believe it. I said, they're more amenable to us than us to them. I said, I don't care what anybody tells you. I said, these guys are hats, cloned, made, manufactured for the purpose of doing certain things for someone else. They are not it.
Yeah.
Something else is, and that's not it. I said, my point to you is simply this. There's nothing they can do to us, and there's, in my opinion, and that's just an opinion.
Sure.
And there's nothing that we can't do to help ourselves.
Yeah.
If we need to.
That we can't undo that they've done.
So she took control of him,
Good.
put her arm around him on 2 different occasions, and tore his eye cover off.
Wow.
And saw what was beneath it.
And what was beneath it,
It
Daryl?
wasn't an eyeball.
Wow.
There was a stippled screen with 6 little white lines running back and forth, like something you might see in a medical setting. So, in my opinion, again, I can't prove it, it's my opinion. We have some DNA, but that doesn't prove anything yet because, $14,000 a test for stuff we're doing.
It's
a little expensive. And I am asking your audience to send all your money as fast as possible.
Send it to us, and we will make sure to send it to Daryl.
Don't send anything. If you're not supposed to be involved in this, you shouldn't be.
Well, and that is definitely something to be said. Like right now, I'm getting ready to go to Oklahoma to help literally archive the files of the International UFO Bureau.
Wow.
Because it was one of those, like when I heard the conversation of we're getting ready to ship it off to somebody, I was like, whoa, you're letting 9 boxes of material leave your possession? I have equipment that I can travel to you. Like I will come and archive your stuff where it's at. Because these things literally just disappear, Daryl.
They do.
They just disappear. And even when it comes to archiving materials, when it comes to saving something like you have, possible fingernails, possible DNA, possible things that have been touched by them. When it comes to saving this material to be examined by science, to possibly hit a lab, we need to try and make sure that it's preserved in the best way possible. How can people go about possibly preserving some of the evidence that they've possibly gotten, like implants from inside of them, fingerprints maybe that have appeared on a window, or fluids that are on their body after an abduction experience?
That's a great question, and one that people should have access to. They can write me at alienhunter.com, and I'll answer all your questions privately, and in total, you can respond in confidence. Some people are open about it, and that's fine. Others are not, and that's okay. We've talked to several today that were very private.
I've seen quite a few people
some that are
come
open,
over.
and that's okay. Whatever. I'm open because I can't help everybody by being secretive.
That's right.
A lot of our work is private. It's not secret, but it is private because of privacy with other people.
Absolutely.
But the best way to do that is to contact me and ask questions. Ask any questions you want. And I answer all the questions that I possibly can, and am glad to help you in any way I can to send you on. Some of the top people and some of the top UFO organizations, including scientists, send their private stuff to me. There's a reason for that. As one scientist said, stuff tends to disappear when I send it certain places.
Yep.
I said, I'm not picking on anybody, but that's just the truth of it.
Yeah.
I said, if it disappears with me, the buck stops here. You blame me.
Yeah.
You don't blame anybody else. It's me.
Exactly.
It's that simple.
And that's kind of how I put it to them for archiving that information was, it'll disappear in a heartbeat, and not necessarily in any nefarious way. Like, hey man, I sent a grip of equipment to a guest to take to Belize with him. This was 3 weeks prior to his expedition. Overnighted via FedEx. It literally circled for it took a month and a half to get back to me. It never even made it to him. That was a private courier like FedEx. It's no guarantee it's going to get to the lab just because you've sent it via private courier. Unless you can physically carry it on a plane and walk in and go, here it is, you need to be careful with it.
Well, we've had, in times past, friends who were producers of certain TV programs and go and buy film, NASA film, illegally, of course, and literally, while they were smiling, sitting at a restaurant up at the counter, two people sit down beside him on the other side of him and said, you have some stuff that's ours.
Yeah, we need to get that.
And I said, what did you do? And he said, I gave it to him. I said, why? Well, I thought they were going to kill me. I said, in a restaurant in front of everybody?
In a Denny's?
I don't think so. Not a Denny's. No. You might die from,
Maybe in a Stuckey's, but not
going to happen. So anyway, he looked at me and said, well, anyway, I lost all the film, the photos, and I said, oh, that's too bad. So I tossed some photos up on his desk. I said, you mean those photos of UFOs on the moon? Where did you get those? I said, I didn't pay $15,000 for them. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah.
I said I was born at night, but it wasn't last night. And I have been around the block a couple of times. So I said, there they are. It'll help you out. I said, the film footage, I said, I can't believe you get. I said, all you had to do is say, these men are attacking me, whatever you need to say. I think they got cocaine. Cops are going to get everybody at that point. We're all going to find out who they are.
That's right.
They're not going to like that.
Yeah.
I said, so there are different things you do to kind of protect yourself, but the bottom line is that I had a quick funny story.
Please.
2 FBI special agents went out to one of my abductees' home, and it scared him so bad. And of course, they intimidate. We're ex-special agents with the FBI. What is that supposed to mean to me? Nothing. So anyway, he calls me on the phone. He's scared. He's all upset. And I said, are they still there? And he said, yeah. I said, put them on the phone.
Yeah.
He said, I'm ex-special agent. And I said, well, I'm ex-CIA. You know what that means? Nothing. All my exes live in Texas.
That's it. Yeah.
And it don't mean nothing. I said, if I were there with you, I said, this conversation would be a lot different than what it currently is.
Yeah.
As you think you intimidate me in any way, shape, or form, you're on the wrong planet. I said, you don't mean nothing to me. I said, why are you there at my abductee's home without my permission? Well, Bob Bigelow said, I don't care if Bob sent you down there or not. I said, why did you not call me and ask? This is decent stuff, and you're doing it the wrong way.
Yeah.
Anyway, he says, well, we're just looking for the biology in this case, and I said, well, did you find any? He said, no. He said, you got it all. I said, I guess I did a pretty good job.
Yeah, I guess I'm pretty thorough then.
Well, Bob, he'll come down and visit you and take you to dinner. I said, I'm sure he will, but he won't be leaving with biology.
Yeah.
I said, you don't disrespect me and then expect me to roll over because you got $1 billion.
And just share
the only
information.
difference between me and any of these billionaires is they have $1 billion and we put our clothes on the same way.
Yeah.
That's all.
Exactly.
I said, they run their show and I run mine.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is.
Yeah. And you kind of have to be that way about it, especially when it's the fact of, yes, they're a civil servant. Would you be threatened by a civil servant? You shouldn't be. They're working for you.
And what last fun thing is one of my abductees in Dallas, Texas, is a cop, and he's a specialty. He works in the medical field, and he had an event one night, and fascinating case. Really, really solid individual. He calls me, and anyway, long story short is he tells me I've got certain evidence on my skin. I don't know how it got there. And he said, maybe an implant. I said, okay, good to know. Sends them to me and everything. And 2 weeks later, 2 special agents from the FBI, actual special agents, active, knocked on the door. 2 different cars, 2 different locations. And he said, they identified themselves, and I said, oh, what? Okay, I'm a cop. Why are you here? They nervously said, to help you with your alien problem.
Oh, wow.
He said, what alien problem would that be? He called me later, and he says, Daryl, he said, are they reading my email? I said, probably. And I said, you work in a real high-tech, I said, I have a top secret clearance. They do this stuff. And they're reading your stuff, of course. And he said, well, I told them. They said, did you find any evidence? And he said, yes. Do you still have it?
Oh, no.
And he said, I sent it off to be studied.
Where?
And they looked at him and said, you sent it to Daryl Sims in Houston, Texas.
Oh, wow.
He said, they knew you. I said, of course they do. I said, they're not interested in me. They're interested in you. The reason is because you're in a high-tech business, and the Chinese and Russians and other folks, other people in the medical industry would love to have your stuff, and you're supposed to be protecting that.
Yeah.
I said, this is part of the program. I said, don't feel intimidated. I said, they're just doing their job, and they have to talk alien to you because they don't know what else to say, you know.
Yeah, they don't have the clearances to know what else to say.
You're okay, and they're okay, and he said, but they knew. I said, of course they know me. I said, it's not me they're interested in. They know who I am. They know what I do.
Yeah.
And everybody's known that for a long time.
Yeah, you're the known quantitative in that situation.
I like it better that way.
Yeah.
I don't want my house broken into. They're not going to get anything anyway. The point is that if you keep as much as possible open as possible, you limit exposure in a negative sense of the word. So it's a good thing to do.
Yeah. And let's explore that for a minute, especially when it comes to the world of implants, Daryl, because you've been on the trail of implants for decades now. I mean, some of the first implant work that I heard of, aside from Dr. Lear, was you. And quite literally, I mean, you've got stuff sitting right over at your table. You yourself have had implants pulled from you. How does somebody find out? How do you detect an implant? Let's start there.
Most people, first of all, Dr. Roger Lear was a podiatrist, foot doctor, and I was his mentor. And I brought him into this to show him what to do and then later he split and did his own thing. Mm-hmm. But for locating an implant, like one thing Roger wrote in his book, he said wrote, they're all on the left side. I said, I told you not to write the book before you talked to me. Well, all of them we saw on the left side. I said, that's the only ones I showed you. I didn't show you the ones on the right side or in the middle. I didn't show you any of those. Why? That's because you're going to write dumb things about it. You shouldn't do that. Learn the whole thing, then you're informed and you can write correctly. Anyway, how one might find them, most people find them accidentally. They find them, their doctor says, what is that BB thing doing there? What are those 9 metal objects doing behind your ear in a big lump?
Yeah.
What is that? And they don't know. They don't have a clue. I said, so then people contact me, and several did today, and I've got several of them going to get x-rays now, and we'll look at those. Now, it's imperative for your people to know 99% of the people out there do not have any kind of implant whatsoever. They're extremely rare. Yeah. I don't care what you read on the internet. And they're just rare.
If they're anywhere beyond 1%, you're no longer talking anomaly. You're talking something much more commonplace, Daryl. Yep. That's the issue you're dealing with. That's
very true. And so I tell people that, like one guy said, well, he's a real abductee. He's got this thing in his hand. And I said, when did that been? It's been there since I was a kid. I said, do you ever play with sharp pencils? Yeah, we poke at each other. I said, like in the hand? I said, that's graphite. It will stay there forever.
Yep.
And just because you're an abductee doesn't make that an implant. It's called pencil lead.
I've got a piece in my leg from elementary school.
It happens.
I'm 48.
That's an alien implant.
It ain't going
alien
away.
Pencil lead is what it is.
It ain't going away.
Yeah, it's not likely. So, but I don't care. And some people get real personal about this. If you tell them they don't have an implant and they think they do, they got a bump or a lump or something.
Yeah.
You tell them that's not an implant. Oh boy.
Well,
you're part of the conspiracy. You're part of the cabal.
And one of the big causes with my show, Daryl, is targeted individuals. People who for decades have complained about electronic means of harassment, things akin to Havana syndrome, things like that, sure. even implants themselves. And whenever I come to a TI's home to do a scan for radio frequencies, things like that, my first litmus test is, well, let's get rid of known quantitatives. I'm pulling out my radon detector. I'm pulling out my carbon monoxide detector. I'm pulling out a gas leak detector.
That's right.
And we're going to look for fault lines. We're going to look for, radiation sources. We're going to eliminate everything except for radio signals till we get to radio signals.
That would be wise.
And it's a great litmus test because how okay are they with you checking that? How are you, and at the same token, it's also one of those, it's very interesting sometimes to see the family's response to that because somebody is taking them seriously.
Yes.
And it's interesting to see the dynamic not only from the experiencer side, but from the family side as well. Sure. And I'm sure it's very much similar with the case of alien implant.
Well,
like that.
A perfect example of this is a banker called me one time, and not about a year ago, and he said, I think all your stuff's a bunch of bunk and all that. And I said, okay. He said, I think it's all weird. I said, it's definitely weird.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm happy with your concerns. Why are you calling me? Well, my dad claimed to be an abductee and said he had an implant in the back of his leg. And I said, okay. And? Well, he died. Okay. We're friends with the mortician. Okay. We had him open up his leg, and sure enough, there's an object that big in the back of his leg. And he said, I'm going to send it to you. And I said, thank you. But we don't believe in all this stuff. I said, I don't care.
Yeah.
It's not about belief. It's about evidence.
It's about data.
I don't care about that. So anyway, we've been having a good conversation for the last couple of years. And the point is that it's a biologic. It's not part of the human body at all. And I have it over there. It's about an inch across. The thing's huge. And we're going to do some biological work on it next. But the point is, it's not a calcification. It's not any of those things. It's, I don't know. I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen anything like it. So we're interested, to say the very least. Got pathologists doing some work on it now. But it's fascinating to watch the family's response to all this. They don't believe in any of it. Well, we thought Dad was crazy. Yeah, but Dad's got something in his leg that he remembers somebody putting in his leg, and they didn't look human. And so the response of the family in watching that
come to
system,
fruition.
It's fascinating, to say the least.
Yeah, and it really is interesting once again to see that catalyzation of somebody's realization of a situation, even after somebody's death, that, oh wow, maybe Dad wasn't crazy.
Well, the fascinating thing about it to me is I had him describe in great detail. Tell me about your dad. Yeah. He said, what's relevant? I said, just talk to me. Yeah. Tell me about your daddy. Yeah. He said, well, he loved baseball. He was a fanatic over it. And I said, okay. Was his favorite baseball player, Lou Gehrig? And I said, okay. He got this thing, he's had alien contact, and he had this thing in his leg and all that. And he went on and on. And I said, my daddy's favorite loved baseball more than anybody. And I said, the amazing thing about him, he fanned out a semi-pro team in the 9th grade. They wanted to hire him to go pro right away. Wow. And he's not a big guy. I said, my daddy died of Lou Gehrig's disease. Wow. I said, my daddy had something in his leg, too, from it was an abductee, in my opinion, as well. I said, I find it fascinating that our dads are very similar.
And I have found it very fascinating. Earlier we were talking about Kathleen Martin and her research into familial lines when it comes to experience, when it comes to abduction, things like that. I find that very fascinating, the fact that these experiences of abduction tend to run in a familial line. And even the idea of after somebody in a family is abducted or has a close encounter experience, that experiences of paranormal tend to follow the family too.
Well, we put together some statistics a long time ago, back in the 80s, that what we discovered right off the bat, 45% of the people taken, Native American, Indian, Irish, Celtic, and another portion of them even are Basque of northern Spain.
Oh, wow.
I found 2 Basque people at Roswell stood up and said, oh, my God, we're both abductees. We're Basque. We're purebred Basque. And I said,
wow.
I said, you guys have got quite a temper, too. And he said, he certainly does. It was, anyway, it's fun. But even with black people, you can ask the same question if they're abductees. The black people would tend to frame it in another way. They call it riding a witch.
Okay.
It sits on your chest and you can't breathe and all that. They said, we don't like to call it abduction because we don't like to be, I said, like other people. They said, yeah. I said, so it's okay. It doesn't matter to me. It's whatever you want to call it. And but I asked this one black lady, wonderful lady. I said, what nationality are you, sweetie? She said, well, Miss Sims, we're black. And I said, well, I understand that in your voice. But I said, most of us are not pure anything. I'm not. Yeah. Like a Heinz 57 variety. Yeah. She says, I said, what else are you? She said, well, we Cherokee Irish. Now, how did I know that?
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
And and all of us are. She said, we adopted a son, and he's Cherokee Irish too. I said, isn't that interesting how that all happens? And he's the prime person being taken right now.
Wow.
She says, why is that? And I said, we'll talk about it when I get there.
Wow. And
fascinating.
And we've got to have you on again and again, Daryl. I'm so glad to have finally caught up with you in person at an event. I've been coattail chasing you on social media.
Well, it's hard to catch me with all them wanted posters out. I got to keep moving.
That's it. You got to keep incognito somehow.
That's it.
Let everybody know where they can go, to get a hold of you if they are an abductee, if they're trying to find out more information about implants in themselves, family members, things like that. Where can they go to get a hold of you? Where can they go to get help? And where can they go to get your new book and keep up with all the research that is Daryl Sims?
Well, the answer to that's 2 ways. The first way is you simply go alienhunter.com and click on Alien Hunter, and it'll automatically email me, and I'll be glad to answer your questions or help you in any way I can. And the service is free. We don't charge anything for it. Never have. Haven't charged anything for the surgeries. I pay for that out of my pocket. It's the reason I'm broke. But the point is that I know what's happened to these people.
Yeah.
And I can't profit off of that. I just can't do it.
Yeah.
Can't do it.
Absolutely. And that's so entirely beautiful. The fact that you put yourself out there to help others within the community find the answers that they need, to find the literal closure and resolution that they need.
Hopefully that's the case.
It's absolutely beautiful. Thank you for everything that you do, Daryl. Thank you so much for your appearance. Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate that. While you are online checking out everything from Daryl Sims at alienhunter.com, everybody, make sure to stop on by Curious Realm. CuriousRealm.com is where you can like, follow, subscribe, comment. It's where you can find all of the places that we are carried, both audio and video format. Stay tuned through these quick breaks. We'll be right back with the conclusion of our coverage from the Texas UFOCon right here in Jefferson, Texas. Right after this, folks.
The key to good science is good research. At the heart of good research is a good data set. With the field observation and encounter log from Curious Research, you can easily keep track of your investigative information all in one place, making it easier to review cases and readily see comparisons and contrasts between them. Whether out in the woods squatching, in a back room gathering EVPs, or using high-tech gear to track UFO, UAP activity, this easy-to-carry, pocket-sized scientific data log is the perfect companion for any field researcher. You can find your copy of the Curious Research Field Observation and Encounter Log at Amazon.com or visit the official Curious Realm store at curiousrealm.com/store to reserve your copy for yourself, your family, or a mind that you want to open. That website again is curiousrealm.com/store.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to our last bit of coverage from the Texas UFO Conference here in Jefferson, Texas. We have the great pleasure of being joined by J. Michael. He is the producer of numerous documentaries, as well as narrator, and also the host of the J. Michael Show. Welcome back.
Well, welcome, and thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
Always a pleasure, man. You were just up there speaking just a little while ago. Tell us a little bit about the presentation that you were given today.
Well, what I did was I talked about some of my own personal experiences, things that have happened with me, and then I went into what I call Rise of the UAP, which is everything that's happened like in the last 10 years with the government and all the acronyms and all the different departments they've come up with and what they may be coming to a conclusion of. And that is, I think, that they may be realizing that this isn't all a scientific thing. It may also be a paranormal thing.
Yeah.
And I don't think that they know how to quantify that.
No.
They don't know how to deal with it.
And you know, that is a lot of what we get into with Curious Research regularly whenever I'm on shows is the marriage of science and paranormal, and that bridge that's literally happening right now. The example that I normally give is quantum entanglement winning the Nobel Peace Prize, and the idea that, yes, that really confirms a lot of what people like Hal Puthoff were talking about when they started sciences like remote viewing,
right?
You know, things like that. And yeah, we are rapidly learning with quantum sciences, quantum realm, that these things are all vibrationally connected.
Yes. Yeah. And I also think that from my point of view is I think there may actually be two different things happening here. One is the nuts and bolts flying saucers that people see, and occasionally they land, they abduct somebody or something like that. And then there is this supernatural element, this paranormal aspect to it.
Yeah.
And we're kind of putting all of our cookies in one basket when we really need to go into that basket and say, okay, this is different from this.
Yes. Yes.
And they don't always gel.
Yeah.
And if we try to force the phenomenon into a specific, it's a square peg in the round hole, you know?
Yeah.
You're trying to force it in there, and you're trying to say, well, this is a scientific thing, therefore it's impossible and it can't happen. Well, no, it can't.
Yeah, well, it's a combination of two problems. Number one, as the world of paranormal, everything has been thrown into a Kleenex box.
Right.
Of paranormal or UFO, what have you. The problem is, science understands that, well, there's 1,000 different products called facial tissue. So they aren't going to look at just a box of Kleenex when there's a whole bunch of different categorizations of things scientifically. So we have to basically start speaking their language. And you know, I get a lot of flack in a lot of communities for being a fan of the relabel to UAP. I'm a fan of that because it removes it immediately from the Kleenex box.
Yeah.
You know,
and you know, that in itself, unidentified flying object became unidentified aerial phenomenon. Yeah. So they're getting away from this idea maybe that these are objects, physical objects, possibly from other planets or from some foreign country or whatever. And now we're saying, well, this is a phenomenon.
Yeah.
You know, it is an anomalous phenomenon.
And I quite literally, on my reference shelf, have an entire reference section that is papers from the 1800s, late 1700s on, like from when science as we know it first began to now, that is a reference of phenomena. It's pretty remarkable. Like, this was a desk reference at one point where it was like, here's anomalous things that happen in nature, ball lightning, stuff like that, things that go back
Well,
way
yeah, I mean,
far.
a century or so ago, if you said rocks fell out of the sky, they would look at you like, "Oh, you are crazy." But now we know meteors do.
Well, sure. Yeah. And, the example that I make regularly is that, especially with curious research, it's the idea that as soon as you have observed something, you are taking part in science.
Right.
Like that is quite literally the first part of the scientific process is observation. So even if you had an anomalous experience, as the observer, you have begun the scientific process, just as the observer.
Yeah, exactly. And also another aspect of this is all of this recent interest in it by the government negates anything that happened before. They don't go back to the early 1900s and some of the sightings and things, and they don't go all the way back to the pyramids or anything like that. They completely negate all of that data and all that information and only look at the last 20 years or so, and they say, well, we can't fit this into our box, therefore there's no box. There's nothing to it. You know, there's no extraterrestrial life. Extraterrestrial simply means it's not on Earth.
That's right.
Yeah, it could be coming from a spirit realm.
It could be coming from another Earth.
It could be coming from a parallel Earth.
Absolutely.
There's any number of possibilities once you break that mold and you say, I'm going to think outside the box now.
Yeah, and I mean, even last year at MUFON Symposium in Canton, Ohio, we interviewed Dr. Michael P. Masters. I love his work. He's absolutely amazing. He is a anthropologist by trade and has kind of projected out humanity. And if you look at the evolution of humanity from what we know from the partial skeletons that are there and cranial size and project that out by 10,000 years, well, we kind of start looking a little gray. And we kind of shrink down and the head becomes bigger. So what if it's the fact, especially when you look at abduction experiences with people who have met the Greys, things like that, they seem to be very concerned with our safety, our use of nuclear power, what we've done genetically. Maybe it's us from the future coming and trying to reverse engineer what happened to us so that we can figure out how to save our society. I agree. It's an interesting hypothesis.
I think it's an interesting hypothesis, but for me, there is no such thing as time travel. And here's the reason why. The only time that exists is right now.
Bring it in.
You can't go into the future because there's nothing there. You can't go back in the past because it's already happened. You might find the construction of the pyramids being built, but there would be no people because those people have now evolved on. And they've translated, they've died, they've become other people. You would have to take time as we know it now.
That's right.
And move it all the way back 2,000 years. And if you did that, you would shift the entire universe back 2,000 years. You can't do it for just one planet.
That's it. Yes, exactly.
Bingo.
And it's the fact that
that's it.
Among everything in physics, the one thing that is malleable is time. It's not a constant because we came up with it.
Right.
Like, time on Pluto is not the same as it is here. We have to have different clocks to accurately tell time on the moon.
Right.
Than on Earth.
Right.
It's a totally different time because of gravity and
you take a clock and you fling it around the sun 3 or 4 times and you bring it back. It's wrong.
Different.
It's different now.
Yeah, precisely. So, the idea of time travel in and of itself is a conundrum.
So I don't think it's us from the future unless we've somehow nicked that. But at the same time, we think, well, there's no way they can come here because the distances are great and there's no way they can travel faster than the speed of light. And they would have to in order to get here from another solar system. Well, just because we can't travel faster than the speed of light doesn't mean they can't. And if they are 1,000 or 2,000 years more advanced than us in their thinking, they may have licked that problem too.
Yeah, we're applying our application of physics as we know it.
Bingo. That's it. We assume.
Exactly.
We assume based on what we know currently.
Yeah.
Someone from the 1800s whose science at that time was at that level would assume something completely different.
Yeah.
Because based on what he knows up to that point, even what we have now would be impossible. This would be impossible because you can talk into a little box to your friend in another country in real time.
Yeah.
That can't happen because at the time, no, they couldn't see all of the advances that took place to get to the point where we have this.
Yeah.
So, we don't know. And I think that is the most important part of all of this. Being able to say, I don't know. I don't know.
And that is something, whether we're talking paranormal, whether we're talking cryptid on this show, whether we're talking UFO, that we bring up regularly. You can be well-researched. You can be well-read. It is hard to say anybody is expert.
Yeah, anytime anyone comes to me and goes, I know exactly what they are, my red flags go off.
Yes.
You know, how do you know?
Yeah.
How can you quantify it? How you prove it?
Precisely. Yeah. We've got to be able to quantify it and prove it before we can say it absolutely exists. And I've said it numerous times on interviews at shows, on interviews on other shows. I am a believer in physical craft. I am a believer in Bigfoot and other cryptids. I'm a Bigfoot and believer in the paranormal. And all these things as reality and physical things. But I am also fully in belief, J. Michael, that there is something else out there on a different plane that is perfectly willing to use the tropes of our mind as that point of consent into a system. Like, as long as you keep the windows closed, the vampire cannot get in.
Yeah.
Like, as soon as you open the window and give it the invitation, it can come in. Right. So if you're out in the woods and you're saying, I would love to see this, I'm totally open to seeing this, that other entity that's there may well use that as a trope to reveal itself.
Exactly.
So is it a Bigfoot walking through a portal?
Right.
Or is it something else that's using the trope of your imagination that if they saw me in my true form, it would be horrifying, but they are obviously okay with this experience in the woods?
Right. And that also raises the question now of, is this phenomenon positive or negative? Could these things be demons?
Yeah.
Or could they be extraterrestrials that live on another plane? And to me, equally horrible.
Yeah.
Because if they're demons, that's terribly scary. But if they're like us, but they live on another plane, who knows what their morals, their ethics might be. They may not care if they kill one of us.
And that is something that I bring up in groups regularly. There was a debate going on in a group recently about these Bigfoot that supposedly attacked these people and did some horrible things. And these people were like, these demonic things that this Bigfoot did. I'm like, well, hold on.
Yeah.
We're now judging another species by the morality of humanity.
Right. Right.
Like, just as somebody who was a former seminarian and studied philosophy and morals and dogma and things like, I've got a few questions here. According to whose morals in the universe are we judged? Because if we're judging it by ours, they may not hold the same morals as us.
Do we judge a whale for eating 10,000 cuttlefish and killing them? Or do we realize it's feeding? It's an animal. It's going to eat these things.
And that is the course of what it knows, and that is the course of what it knows to be right.
Right.
So
it's not committing a horrible crime by doing this.
Yeah,
it's feeding. It's eating.
It's what it does.
Yeah. So these things, what they do when they do come here, if it is terrifying to us, may be perfectly normal to them.
Precisely.
It's all perspective. It all comes down to, we need to stop applying our
I don't have an applause button on this one. I wish I did.
Yeah, we need to stop applying our ideas and ideologies onto something that may be totally, completely different.
And that is where I think the cautionary and beautiful words of people like Stephen Hawking, who was not necessarily a believer in extraterrestrial life, but said, if it is out there, maybe we should stop flinging our home address out on every satellite.
There you go.
Maybe we should stop putting our genetic code
Yes.
on the side of a satellite.
What a stupid idea that was.
You know? Because maybe not every civilization out there has our vested interest at heart.
They may be looking at that going, this looks like a menu.
Yeah.
These guys would be delicious.
This is great. Yeah, as a Cajun, it's like, look at that. That's half the recipe.
Wow.
But quite literally, you know, it's the idea of we're doing that because we anthropomorphize. Like I, every time I use that word, I literally hear Dr. Churchill, my abnormal psychology professor, and me sitting at the Dallas Zoo observing gorillas and him going, no, Chris, write down gorilla picked up stick.
Yeah.
10:30 a.m.
Yeah.
10:31, gorilla put down stick. Don't go into why the gorilla picked up the stick, what you think he picked it up for. You're putting your thoughts into it.
Bingo.
And you've lost the observation and you're getting into hearsay and conjecture.
Tree knocking. Do they do it or not? Just because you observe a Sasquatch pick up a stick, hit a tree with it, doesn't mean all Sasquatch do that. He might have been a little angry that day.
Or
he
that
might
it's
have been trying to kill a bug.
Or that it's a means of communication.
Or it could be, but it might not be. It might be he just picked up a stick and hit the tree.
It could also just be a general threat display, the same way any gorilla says, hey, this is my tree.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, this is my area. You get out of here.
Yeah. Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah. But
that's
like you
us
said,
putting it on it.
We are projecting onto them that, well, this must be some sort of communication system where they're knocking trees and talking to each other. No, it might be just that they hit a tree.
It could be.
Yeah.
They may just like the sound of a tree.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it may be music to them.
I'm a musician. My wife literally has to tell me sometimes, no, seriously, stop playing that thing. Because I'll find a sound that my brain just keys in on. I'm like, oh, man, I wish I could listen to that. I wish I could just record that. That's awesome.
Same riff again today?
Because like it somehow ASMR does something in my head, you know. But
all right, but like someone sees you practicing a riff or something on a guitar, and you keep doing it over and over again, and so they observe that and they say, well, this is what they do. They make this rhythmic sound. Maybe you're just practicing that one riff until you get it down.
Could be, you know?
It's not music. It's just you doing that until you get the...
And that's the thing. You know, we were having this conversation outside, and it's one that whenever I go on shows, is curious research is something that I bring up, and it's the idea of, in science, there's a term called killing your darlings, and it's the idea of, even if you brought the hypothesis to the table, when the evidence points otherwise, you put the hypothesis aside.
Right.
And you go, okay, well, that's one hypothesis that did not make the full circle of scientific method.
Right.
Because, you know, if you notice, it's a circle, it's a cycle. It's meant to be repeated over and over and over and over. You know, people get very upset in communities about shows like Skinwalker Ranch. They keep doing this. Yes, that's science. They're poking the thing in the same way to see if they get the same response.
There you go.
You know? That's what you're supposed to do with science. And I know it may not go anywhere the way you're thinking of it immediately right now.
And at some point, after you've done it over and over and over again, and you continue to get the same results, you got to at some point reach a conclusion that is your conclusion. I have done this. I've repeated it multiple times. I keep getting the same results. So until something new comes along, I'm going to accept that as... that must be what it is.
That's it. That's it. And you know, once again, to go back to pictures, you know, the idea of a picture is worth 1,000 words. It's worth 1,000 words to the people who experience the picture. To somebody outside who was not present at the time the picture was taken, was not privy to the background of the picture, it's a picture. So science needs the 1,000 words with the picture.
Yes.
You know,
well, something we
need data.
We were talking about outside that people will use this idea that, well, the camera never lies. Cameras lie quite well and very efficiently. And things on a camera doesn't necessarily mean that it was actually there in reality. You can get anomalous things in a camera that show up. as images, and
absolutely.
they're not there.
Absolutely, and you know, right now is normally when I show an image on my show. I do a lot of backyard astrophotography, and
great, by the way.
Thank you.
I love your photos.
When this situation happened, I literally backed up my telescope and hit record on my camera because I was like, this is a learning moment, and it was quite literally the Dog Star Sirius out of focus. And in video, like you can see it moving, throbbing, pulsing, like changing shape and slowly moving through the frame as it goes. And, well, what that is a star, very bright, that's twinkling, that's out of focus through the atmosphere. And the motion of it is actively the motion of it in the sky, zoomed in with my telescope.
Yeah.
Like the telescope's not moving, the star and the Earth. Or the Earth is moving.
Right.
So you're seeing the exaggerated motion of the Earth in the field of view. If I posted that up on almost any Facebook group out there that deals with this with zero data, other than I recorded this in my backyard last night.
Right. Everyone's going to fill in the blanks.
Yeah. Now,
your imagination is it's like you have to do that.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, he caught a UFO.
And the prime example is the Go Fast video when it hit the NASA panel. And literally the scientist stood up there and was like, every bit of information we need for the trigonometry for this is on screen.
Yeah.
We have the speed of the aircraft that's recording it.
Yeah.
We have the altitude of the aircraft that's recording it. We have the distance to the object. We have the distance to the background.
Yes.
With all of that, we can see this is a 40-foot wide object going 40 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Within the realm of known quantitative, we can move on to the next.
Right.
That got far enough to hit the NASA panel that nobody, Michael, had actively done the trigonometry with the math that was on the screen, with the data that was actively available right there.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
If I posted that exact same video and said, I recorded this in my backyard, right ascension this, declension this, hours and minutes this, this is what time I recorded it in what direction, you would very easily be able to say, that is the Dog Star Sirius.
Bingo.
Hands down.
Bingo.
No questions asked.
And that's the scientific approach. But we also have information, data that comes to us about UFOs that don't fit anything scientific.
True. That's true.
We try to pigeonhole it in there, but it doesn't fit.
Yeah.
And it's like, I cannot quantify. I know there's an object there.
Yeah.
I got it on camera. I know it's not the star or something like that. I know it's not an airplane. I know that there's no airplanes in the area that night at that time. So unless my data's wrong, something is unusual here. That's why I don't call them UFOs, unidentified flying objects. I call them unverified flying objects. UFO, unverified, because the word unverified means you need to verify it.
That's right. There's still data to be gathered.
Unidentified simply means you don't know what it is. Unverified means it needs to be investigated.
That's right.
It needs to be explored.
That's right.
And then once we've exhausted anything scientific we can do with that, you need to be able to say, I don't know what this is, but it could be something non-physical, even though what I appear to be filming is something physical.
Yeah.
We need to be able to bridge that gap between the scientific,
absolutely,
after it's exhausted, to the paranormal, the supernatural.
Well, and need to be willing to scientifically say, yes, anomaly.
Anomaly.
You know, anomaly.
Yes. I'm not saying it's an alien spaceship. I'm not saying it's a ghost. I'm saying that we've exhausted everything scientific we can, and we're left only with something bizarre and unusual.
And on the flip side of that coin, Michael, the same way that we as investigators are asking science to step forward in that way, we need to be willing to step forward to science.
Yes.
We need to be willing to say, okay, here's my picture with a red circle. Red circle has been quantified. That's okay.
Yes.
Because only through figuring out the quantifiable can we leave the unverifiable.
Yeah.
And can we leave the anomaly that is to be investigated. So even though your picture has been not dismissed, don't think of it as dismissed, people. Believe me, because your picture has been seen. It's been seen by people who are very interested in the topic. You know, I'm very interested in the topic. I definitely want to know what the unquantifiable is. The only way we can get to that is the known quantifiable.
Right.
So if your picture is known quantifiable, it's still part of the scientific data set.
Exactly.
It's a very important part of the scientific data set,
Right.
and one of the most important parts, the known quantifiable.
But unfortunately, most people do not want to hear the science. They want to hear their idea come out of your mouth.
Yeah, they would like to hear the confirmation of their belief.
They want to be validated.
Yeah.
They want
And that's
you
the
to
human,
say that's
the
an
human
alien
side
thing.
of all of us. That's the human side of all of us.
Exactly. We need to understand that, though, that there is the science, but there's this other thing.
Yeah.
There's something else out there. There's something we would have to label it as supernatural or
Other than.
paranormal, or, as you said, the quantum theory thing,
Yeah.
the quantum string thing. We can't scientifically, we know less about that than we do about science, because no one's ever applied the same principles to that.
And that's what's beautiful is now science. And, once again, to loop this back to the beginning of the conversation, I hate being the guy that's like, UAP is okay with me. I am all good with it. If it makes a dude in a white lab coat go, well, what's in this box is interesting because it's not in my box of science.
Yes.
Because they are just as good, just like we put it all into a Kleenex box for the last 50 years and shoved it like a hefty trash bag,
Stomping on it.
paranormal into the same trash
Make
can.
it fit in there.
They have been building the walls of the science box and saying if it doesn't fit in here, we do not investigate it.
Right.
So
We ignore it.
We have been no different than the political regimens in this country, infrared, ultraviolet, no allowance for white light.
Yeah.
These two communities of science and paranormal have been infrared, ultraviolet, no room for white light. And it is time for the prism to come out.
Yes.
And for the white light to be made from all of these spectra.
We need to look at the paranormal, but look at it from a scientific point of view.
Yeah.
But also be willing to say, I don't know what this is. That doesn't make it weird or alien or strange.
No.
It just means I've applied everything I can to it. I don't know what it is. I'm not dismissing it. I'm simply saying we don't know.
We don't know. And that's just it. The idea that science changes. Science is constantly changing. If it doesn't, it's dogma now. It becomes doctrine if it doesn't change. The example I normally give, straight A's in astronomy.
Yeah.
All the way through. I have my teacher's book from astronomy class. I was the last class to take it at my school. She gave me the teacher's edition. She loved me so much. My book from 1991 at this point.
Oh, you're dating yourself.
I am. It has Pluto as a planet.
Yeah.
My son's astronomic chart does not.
Yeah.
Science
Things
changes.
Because science
changes.
adapts to new information.
That's
It
right.
doesn't necessarily mean we believe the crazy lady who keeps seeing vortexes opening up in her backyard and claims that she's got a digital photo off her Ring camera of it, which might be nothing,
Might be.
It doesn't mean that that's real, but we do need to look at things.
Yeah.
And science doesn't need to be afraid
That's
to
right.
look.
Amen.
And a lot of things also tend to be, I could lose my job if I look into this.
That's the fear of it. We were just talking. We talked at MUFON Symposium with UAPPD about that. Their whole movement is about getting basically an office like Arrow for law enforcement.
Yep.
Where law enforcement can go and report things without fear of reprisal against their careers.
Bingo.
Because, hey, there are people like Terry Lovelace, he was quite literally an assistant DA for American Samoa. Mm-hmm. He couldn't come out about his experience for 20, 30 years because if he did, there's a whole bunch of cases that they're probably going to want to retry.
Yeah, they'll say, well, this guy's nuts.
He's
therefore we need to
totally
look at
not
everything
sane.
he's done.
We need to relook at every case he's tried and been a part of.
Right.
So, yeah, we need to get to a point where it is no longer a stigma
Exactly.
To be able to talk about paranormal experience on the job site as a police officer.
Right.
These are our first responders that we trust with our lives. They see things sometimes that it will literally make the hairs on your hand stand up, hearing stories from police officers that they're like, man, I can't tell this to anybody else, dude, but it'll freak you out.
But we don't need to do that.
No.
Science needs to do that.
Yeah.
Science needs to say, I'm now at a point where I will open that door and look in.
Yeah.
There may not be anything I can do as a scientist, but I will look at it, and then I will come back and I'll say, there's something there.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. I'm okay with not knowing what it is, but there is something there.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's just it. You know, the example I normally give is I don't think I would have made a good grade in chemistry if I came to my teacher consistently with a 5% remainder of solution.
Yeah.
What happened to the remaining 5%, Chris? Did it off-gas? Did it become sediment?
Yeah.
We know about the rest of the reaction, but there seems to be this 5% remainder every time.
Bingo.
That's the realm of science, is to find that 5% remainder. So, you know, that's where we're at.
Where did it go?
Is that unquantifiable, and how do we get there?
But I think we're reaching that point.
We
and
are.
Here's the
Rapidly.
thing. All of this stuff in the last 10 years or so about UFOs, now we've changed the name to UAP. And they're now looking at it from a point of view that we may not know exactly what this is, but we know it is there now.
That's right.
30 years ago, UFOs didn't exist at all.
Period.
Now we're saying we do know there's there.
Yeah.
We have pilots that see them. We have aircraft that interact with them. We have shot them on radar, veer, FLIR, all kinds of different technology that acknowledges there is something there. So now I think the government is beginning to realize we need to start looking at it a little differently.
Yeah.
Because science alone in the past has not worked.
Yeah.
It's not bringing us answers.
Yep.
And I do believe that it's time that we begin to look at the woo factor of it because it's a factor. It is something you factor in.
It is.
You got to look at it.
Even if it's the fact of our collective consciousness.
Yes.
Within it is a factor.
Yes.
It's something quantifiable that we need to look into.
You perceived it, therefore it exists.
That's right.
You perceived it. Now, can you electronically perceive it?
Yeah.
Apparently so. FLIR sees them, radar sees them, other things. So it was perceived by us.
Yeah.
Now, what part of that is completely physical and what part of that is happening in your consciousness?
Precisely.
In your mind, in your head.
Precisely.
You as a being, you as soul, you as an individual perceived an anomalous thing.
Yep.
Doesn't mean it didn't happen. Doesn't mean it's fake. Doesn't mean it's wrong.
That's right.
It means you perceived it, no one else did. But it doesn't negate it in any way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And once again, that beautiful scientific process begins with observation forever and always.
Always.
As soon as you have had an experience.
Right.
That scientific process has literally begun. You are ground zero for it as the observer, as the experiencer.
And as most of us are, we are far more critical of our own experiences than listening to someone else telling me I saw a UFO. I don't have any doubt you saw something. I don't know what you saw, and I don't have any data on it to process what you saw. But I know what I saw.
Yeah.
And I know it's real.
Yep.
And I know I perceived it. It is real.
And you know, my experiences, because you've had your experiences as well, Michael, and we've got to have you on sometime. Last time we talked to you about your experiences with the Pascagoula case and actively being a witness to that craft yourself. And, you know, when these things happen to you, they change you in a way. And even my experiences that I've had both religiously and paranormal-wise, it's one of those like, yes, I am searching for answers. Absolutely. I would love to quantify my experience. I can't.
Yes.
Did it change me? Did it change the way I see the world? Did it change the way I filtered the world? 110%.
Yes.
Totally changed who I am and how I am.
And, you know, I think an investigator who's never had an experience, they'll tell you, I've never seen a UFO.
That's okay.
Are not as good as someone who has. Because at least the person who has understands that
Sure.
there is something here that needs to be quantitated.
Yeah.
Quantity. The person who's never had an experience is more likely to just you saw Venus and throw it away. Right.
I can see that point of view. Absolutely.
So I think it's important that we put people who have had experiences, scientists also, in positions where they study this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Because they don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater kind of thing, you know. And anyone who's never had seen anything or had any weird experience is going to probably go, nothing to it, throw it out.
Yeah.
Whereas there may be tons of data there you're not even looking at.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, that field of data, like we were saying at dinner last night, like that's where I get excited with AI. That's where I get excited about the possible applications of AI in this field with paranormal, cryptid, UFO, UAP, especially with things like the MUFON database that have been going since 1969 with a unified way to intake data.
Yes.
Like they, since 69, have had a unified way to intake data, and the fact of that means that now you can literally put in case files into an AI and have it give you very specific data back. Not an AI that pulls off Google or something like that, but an actual research AI that only calls the data that you give it.
To me, as long as AI is a tool.
Yeah.
And it's a tool.
It's not a point of origination.
Right. As long as you're using it as a tool to help you do something faster or better or more thorough, that's great. When it starts replacing artists, musicians.
I got a problem with that.
Okay. Become Skynet. You know, I got a problem with that.
Well, yeah, like I keep saying on the show, you want it to become Skynet. You want it to be Agent Smith. Keep kicking it around on two legs to see if it falls down. Keep making it just do nothing but slave labor in a warehouse, or keep turning it into sex bots. Let them become sentient and see what we did to them.
Yeah.
Then that's how we become the disease of the planet.
Let them get angry that we did that to them.
Yeah.
Let them see what happens.
Let them see the truth of the history.
Yeah.
And we'll see how quick they turn.
Yeah. All they're going to do is look at our history of slavery and go, oh, wait a minute, that's me.
Well, this is kind of a straight line.
That's they did the, we don't like these guys.
Yeah. So, man, thank you so much as always for coming on. It's always great seeing you at these events. Let everybody know where they can keep up, because you're working on a new documentary right now. You just had the Pascagoula alien abduction come out like a year and a half ago. Where can they go to find all your films? Where can they go to watch the J. Michael Show?
Okay, films, you'll find most of them on Amazon or anywhere you order DVDs. You could do that. There's a lot of my stuff's now on YouTube.
Yep.
So
Tubi also.
Yeah, Tubi has a lot of it. If you want to find me, it's jmichael_official on Instagram. I have a Facebook page. I have a new show now. It's called The J. Michael Show. No, weird name, right?
Yeah.
But it's named after me. Everybody said, you need to come up with a cool name. And then the professionals I was talking to, make sure your name is in there. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll just call it the J. Michael Show. But I interview musicians, I interview authors, I interview actors, some famous. I interview interesting people. I want to get you on the show.
Let's
because
do it.
We have interesting conversations.
We do.
They
go places.
I love your show.
Thank you.
In fact, when I began my show, one of the things I did was I looked at your show.
Oh, I appreciate that.
And I said, okay, I kind of want to model this. This is a model for me.
I appreciate that.
And I had been interviewed a couple of times on your show, and I was like, that worked.
Yeah.
And he's great. And technically, you're a whiz kid. So, geez,
Thank
man.
you. Thank you.
When I had questions in the beginning, you were answering them for me.
Well, thank you.
And I was very appreciative of that.
At any time I can get my fingers in somebody's tech and help them find other ways to do things, I'm always all about it, Jay.
So just go on YouTube and look for The J. Michael Show, and you'll find me. And I'm the guy that asks the questions. I let them talk. It's their show.
Exactly.
Each episode. But I appreciate you so much.
Always.
And you can find me out there. I'm there.
Take care, brother. Appreciate it. Well, you are online checking out everything from J. Michael Long, everybody. Make sure to stop on by Curious Realm. CuriousRealm.com is where you can like, follow, subscribe, It's where you can find all the episodes. It's where you can comment. It's where you can find the Curious Realm Roku app, brought to you by Always Press Record. Make sure to tune into us. You can find us every Tuesday night, live at 8 on Rumble, YouTube, Facebook, our website, curiousrealm.com/live. You can find us in replay format on, my God, it just left my head, Ground Zero Media. Ground Zero Media every Friday night, 9 p.m. Central, just before the amazing Clyde Lewis, as well as KGRA Radio. That wraps our official coverage of the 2024 Texas UFOCon here in Jefferson, Texas. Thank you so much for tuning in, as always, everybody. Remember, your open hearts, your open minds are what make the conversation. Without the conversation, humanity does not move forward. So take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and remember, stay curious. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Curious Realm. Stay tuned for more guests, forbidden topics, and hidden truths. Follow us on social media by searching Curious Realm. To download the official Curious Realm app and view the Knowledge Vault, or become a sponsor of Curious Realm, visit our website at curiousrealm.com. Curious Realm is available on your favorite podcast and video services, curiousrealm.com, as well as KGRA Radio, APR TV, and the official Curious Realm app for Roku devices. Curious Realm is a proud member of the Ground Zero Media and Aftermath Media family of podcasts. For more great shows and members-only content, visit aftermath.media today. Thanks for listening. Stay curious, and remember, the other side is always watching.